Good evening, everybody, and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for the season finale of the Pro Series. We are heading to the Circuit of the Americas this evening for 90 minutes of action to see how the very best drivers on the LFM platform play out and see how they tackle this very demanding circuit. Such a tricky one for all of these drivers to try to negotiate. We've seen it in the past where track limits and corner cuts, all of that can play into effect. With 90 minutes of high-octane action, very possible that we could be seeing some mistakes for certain drivers, but we'll have to see how it all plays out. Thinking over the championship though, Marco Bischoff leads the way in the standings going into the finale, as he has done for quite a good portion of this calendar. Jardier winning last time out of Monza in a disaster race for Marco Bischoff does make it mathematically possible that Jardier could end up taking this championship, but it is going to be so tricky for him to do. He really needs Marco to have an absolute disaster again, realistically a DNF, and for Jardier to come away with the victory here at COTA in order to be able to take that championship away. But we'll have to see how it all plays out. Obviously, last time it was a duel between Jardier and George Boothby all the way to the flag. Got the win basically in the pit stop phase. Jardier, really aggressive pit entry, and then a just very clean and consistent end to the race. Saw him manage to jump ahead of his Yassi teammate and get another and crucial victory for the season. A rather unexpected one as well. The BMW not the best performing car in recent events with the changes to the BOP, and Monza wasn't one of its strongest places in recent times, even prior to then anyway. So Jardier was very surprised to come away with that victory, and even more so, I imagine, with Marco Bischoff having such a poor result there. Got caught up in incidents left, right and centre in that race. Still somehow managed to finish inside the top 10, but he was caught up in incident at the very start on the run down towards the very first chicane. There was cars flying everywhere that he had to try to avoid and negotiate. It was absolute chaos, but he kept a cool head and he drove exceptionally well to manage to get himself back into a point-scoring position and minimising the damage, crucially, to what Jardier was able to achieve from that race. But going into COTA today, already talked about track limits a little bit, a very different circuit in terms of the whole field, very technical in comparison like to Monza. Monza, although tricky and demanding in its own right, there's no shadow of a doubt, COTA is a very fiddly circuit. It's a bit of a mishmash of famous corners from around the world of other great circuits. Turns 17 and 80, very reminiscent of almost a back-to-front style of the quadruple apex corner we see at Istanbul, not somewhere that we head to on ACC, unfortunately. And then we also got that opening section through 3, 4, 5 and 6, very reminiscent of Maggots and Beckett's. And there's so many tricky areas around this circuit where you've got to negotiate curbs and try not to jump over any of the sausage curbs on those blind entries. You've got to worry about very nitpicky track limits and not getting any warnings for extensions or cuts. And it makes it a very tricky circuit to try to set up for as well. There's this really long backstretch all the way down from turn 11 to turn 12, and you really want to optimize that for top speed because it's very difficult to get overtaking opportunities anywhere else on the circuit. That is definitely where these drivers will be aiming to make up most of their positions. But you need all of the grip and all of the downforce in these slow speed sections as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how all of these drivers negotiate that this evening and how they set up their cars. Thinking in terms of the BOP, the Porsche was always strong around here from the start, maybe even a bit stronger now with the top speed benefits that it has gained during this whole revision of the BOP. Any things like Hondas and Ferraris, they might end up being pretty quick as well. And I think the M4s, unfortunately for Jardier, might struggle a little bit, but certainly not over and done with by any means. 90 minutes, a lot can happen. We've also got a little bit of variability in the weather as well. We'll have to see how that plays into things. So we will be able to make our way into the server fairly shortly when that all fires up. One thing I do want to say is that we are closing in on 600 subscribers onto this LFM channel. Obviously, quite a new channel, and it's just been wonderful to see so much support from each and every one of you, and it has been so amazing to see all of the nice comments in the chats and all the response to the channel. And potentially we'll have to see if we get to that 600 subscriber mark by the end of this evening. If you are enjoying the action that you've seen in previous streams, then do consider hitting that subscribe button and following more action in the future. Take a little bit of a look at what we have going on with this circuit. 20 corners, though, of complete chaos and technicality. The run up towards turn 1, tricky and aggressive braking zone. Very wide on the entry, much tighter on the exit. Then that fast run down through turn 2, and then that Magus and Beckett's-like section of 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then wind your way back up the hill through 7, 8, and 9. Always a tricky one in terms of those track limits, down to the hard braking zone into 11, and then that big backstretch all the way towards turn 12. We'll see a lot of action taking place there. Then tricky Mickey Mouse section through turns 13 all the way to 16, really. Lots of start-stop kind of style corners, very tricky traction zones for some of these cars. It's particularly that sector where the Porsche tends to shine on this circuit, and its natural ability to be agile, get good traction, good on the brakes, is where it ends up managing to benefit in the way that that car is kind of naturally built. Then through those final series of corners, the fast right-handers does make it a very interesting section. Not quite flat out in the way that we might see on a Formula 1 qualifying style lap, but in these GT3 cars, it's a really interesting one to try to tackle. You want to get on the throttle as early as you can, but you've got to be mindful about the penultimate corner and setting yourself up for the run going in towards turn 19, which is a tricky corner in its own right with that sausage curb sitting on the apex. So easy to misjudge the entry and then fire yourself onto the outskirts of the circuit. Not only does that tend to lose you time, but with ACC the way it is, might even give you a track limit warning for your troubles as well. And then turn 20, bringing it round to the end of the lap. So it'll be really interesting to see how these drivers deal with qualifying, and also what are the likes of tyre degradation going to be during this race as well. It's such a hard circuit on the demands of the car, and with 90 minutes and a single pit stop with that 20-minute pit window sitting in the middle of this race, it's going to be really interesting to see how that ends up playing into it. That might be something that starts to bring the likes of the M4 back into play and might give Jardier the chance he needs. So I think we may be able to make our way into the server in just a moment. So let's have a look. Yep, that is all fired up, so we shall make our way across. That shall get us all set up so we can start to see how these drivers negotiate this absolutely incredible circuit. We've got the final moments of free practice actually before we switch over, so still a little bit of time before we make our way over. But we have some stellar drivers joining us on the field, as we do every week, of course, but some particularly standout names that we'll highlight and go through when we start to see everybody on the grid. So in the meantime, I shall get us all set up before we end up seeing what will be a 50-minute qualifying session for all of these drivers, and seeing how they manage to negotiate what is just undoubtedly such a demanding circuit layout for them to tackle. Interesting series of cars as well this evening. We've got a pretty decent mixture of Aston Martins. We've got some Porsches, some BMWs. We've even got a Rogue Lexus in this split as well. And there we go. We have started to make our way into qualifying, so I shall flip us over in just a second. As here we go then, 15 minutes of qualifying underway, and it will be Samir Fock to be the first out on circuit then, seeing what he can do in the Ferrari. Certainly be an interesting one, see how all of these different cars fare. Also the likes of, I'm interested to see what the Lamborghinis might end up doing as well around here, because very rapid in a straight line now since the BOP changes, and car that's very naturally agile in terms of the way that it takes some of these slow speed corners. So that could be one that ends up working out fairly nicely, but I have to see how they all get on. As making their way down towards the hairpin for the first time on this formation lap, taking it nice and easy to get those tyres up to temperature before we start to see what each of these drivers are really capable of at chucking their cars around this fantastic circuit layout. But Sammy Fock then continuing to be the driver who will be the first to set a lap, it seems, and followed up by his Yassi teammate with a very nice livery on that Ferrari. George Boothby, the only other triple winner this season, along with Jardier, will be maybe in contention for another one this week, but has certainly been in phenomenal form. And maybe if he had joined us a little bit earlier on in the season, may have been in a position to give Marco Bischoff a bit of a tougher time on negotiating the championship lead. As then we'll go on board with Samir then, as he takes us for a first lap of this circuit, as I think one of the cameras is unfortunately not loaded in the way that I was hoping for, so we'll have to settle for this one in the end. But on board the dash then of the number 7 Ferrari, Sammy then hard on the brakes in towards turn 1, up the hill. He can brake so late, so much later than you would naturally think due to that increase in the altitude, and then through this next series of corners, such a fast and flowing series of turns, and really have to try to line up your apexes, because any mistakes that you make in that sequence will start to have a consequence further down the line. Also to apologise, when you just realised that the in-game sound was off, but there we go, hopefully starting to come through now for everybody. But Sammy then fairly tidy opening part of the lap, and then the run down towards turn 11 then. Potential opportunities for some overtakes into here, clipping that apex nicely, and then hard on the power, and then carry as much momentum as you can down this long run, this back stretch, all the way towards turn 12. You can see nice gap to the cars behind, so he won't be feeling any pressure on his qualifying lap. He can concentrate entirely on getting the braking zone sorted in towards this next corner. Gets it nicely through there. Could have maybe used a little bit more of a track on the outskirts, but do need to be careful of both sausage curves on the exit. Goes slightly wide on the entry in towards 13, but nice flow through 14, 15, and then trying to get it turned in for 16. Really awkward corner. You sometimes see some surprise lunges from drivers going in towards that turn. Have to see what they end up doing in the race. And then closing stages of the lap now. Swing yourself over towards the right-hand side and back towards the apex of turn 19. Be careful with the track limits on the outskirts there. And then on the brakes once more. Mind that sausage curb on the entry and those on the exit. And then run it towards the line. And for Samir then, it will be a 205.125. As... see if I can actually pull up his... time. There we go. For each of those, they will start to fill out once each of our drivers completes a lap. But Sammy then setting the benchmark for the time being and actually going a tenth and a half faster than George Boothby, which, considering Boothby's pace, is not something we're too used to, although someone who has absolutely immediately gone out and set a blistering lap time, Marco Bischoff, the number 1 car, the man leading the championship, goes a second clear of anyone. And purple in all 3 sectors. That is an absolutely extraordinary time. A 204.12. And Marco, well, It was already looking like it'd be difficult for Jardier to try to walk away with this championship, but with a time like that, Marco Bischoff absolutely trying to make it an impossibility. So brilliant lap time there from the championship leader, the man P2 in the standings. Jardier currently only sitting in P6, has found a 10th and a half in the opening sector, as I think that was Naga in the number 30 car, bring out the yellow flag for just a second there, but no harm done. Marco Bischoff, though, already finding time, although it's going a bit back and forth, so maybe not consistently up. Someone is, though, making out good time, and a bit of a new addition, I do believe, for the championship. We've got Marco Schade in the number 5 car, currently sitting in P5, driving the Honda, and is our front-running Honda for the time being, as someone else breaks into the 204s. That's Eric Del Fanta in the number 4 Audi. Good effort there from him. He's still in a little bit of a tussle in the championship for the battle for P3 in the standings, with George Boothby and Samir Fox. So it's not settled between those drivers yet, so good stuff there from him to put it up on the provisional front row. Has found almost half a second on his lap so far, as well as Isaac Price, another big name driving for G2 Esports, goes up and puts his BMW M4 currently into P2, although I think there might be a little bit of reshuffling, but a strong effort there from him. Del Fanta has found 0.3 of a second. We've also got Walsingham on a pretty good lap for the time being. He sits in P6 at the moment, but he has found 1/4 of a second going into the final turn. Goes up to 0.3. Can he get it stopped nicely through there? A little bit of a back and forth, but a good lap to the end, and a good response there from him. 204.9 to see him jump up just ahead of Eric Del Fanta and place up in P3 for the time being. I think Marco Bischoff may have made a mistake somewhere in his lap. He hasn't found an improvement by the looks of it. Someone is improving, though. Isaac Price continuing to get confidence in that M4, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do. What about the likes of George Boothby? He is just a little bit up the road from that BMW. He has found a 1/4 of a second so far on this lap. That would help him work towards the top 5, but maybe lacking a bit of pace in comparison to where we have seen this Ferrari in recent weeks. But that was a very nice section there, maybe making a mistake on his previous lap time, because he continued to find time in that series of corners, heading into that tricky braking zone of 16, gets it nicely hooked up through there. We will have to keep an eye on Isaac Price as well, because he's really trying to make a step up towards the front. Noah Ida puts himself into provisional P2, but I don't know if it's going to be P2 for very long with some of these other improvements coming in. The number 3 Ferrari then, 3-time winner so far this season, is George Boothby. Have to see if he can make it 4th this evening. It might be tricky with the pace that Bischoff has shown, but this is certainly going to be a stronger effort. Lost a huge amount of time, though, in the final corner, so that went very poorly for him in the end, but Isaac Price maintained his advantage. Does exactly the same time, to the 1,000th of a second as Noah Ida, and doesn't manage to get himself into provisional P2. But still 6 minutes of qualifying left. And I have also just noticed that we have a driver somewhere in here that is driving the Nissan. Who on earth, which brave soul has taken on that car this evening? Let's see if we can track them down. I think because it was Andre Bayer that is wielding the Lexus for tonight, and the honours of the Nissan goes to Stefan Vahovsky, I do believe. Whereabouts has Stefan placed himself for the time being? Down in 29th at the moment. Maybe not too surprising. The Nissan, not naturally a very pacey car, but nice to still see it being used from some drivers. But my goodness, I have to check back in at the front with this man, Marco Bischoff. He's found almost 0.4 in the opening sector. He has a half a second gap over anyone else already. Is the margin not enough, Marco? He is absolutely determined to fly away with this one in the final round of the season and absolutely make it non-negotiable as to why he deserves to be champion. Still finding time on the entry towards the braking zone of 12. Nicely hooked up through there. Gains a few valuable hundreds. then this really tight and twisty section. Have to see how the number 1 car manages to negotiate his way through there. Lets the car run wide on the exit to carry the momentum. Takes a bit of a tighter line on the entry to 16. And does lose a little bit of time on the exit, but generally still managing to maintain this 0.3 of a second up improvement. You can take a variety of lines through there. It's all about maintaining momentum through that series of corners. Has a little bit of traffic up ahead, but I don't think that will cause him any problems. Gets nicely out of the way in front, loses a bit of time through turn 19 there. But I think it is certainly going to be an improvement, and the first time in the 203s, Marco Bischoff trying to make everyone's life more difficult, and he does! A 203.890 there for the number 1 car, and my goodness, that is a brilliant lap time from our championship leader, and still 4 minutes left to go, and I think he has continued to go on to a bit of a fly. Someone who is up on a big improvement, Luke Addison, coming into the final part of the lap there, almost half a second up at one point, lost the... oh, it's not quite on the... at the end of the circuit. It's actually far earlier, so he's got a lot of time to try to see if he can bring a good lap home. He's got 0.4 up at the moment. He's on the run down towards turn 12, so I have to see what Addison can do with that. A bit further up is Walsingham, who has found 0.3. I can see him jump up in towards the top 4, but whether or not he can maintain that advantage all the way to the line, have to see. It's doing well so far. Really nice livery on this number 14 car, the Visceral Esports car. Did get a little bit over that inside sausage curve more than he would have wanted to, and the McLaren in particular upset by curves very badly, but I think it may be good enough to jump the cars that are just in front. What is it going to be for Walsingham? Did he back out of a lap at the end? Just lost the advantage, it seemed, in the final corner completely. I'm not sure, maybe set up an exit for going on to another lap, so I think he can maintain a better pace on this next one. Lamborghini getting out of the way just in front, and Bischoff, I think, abandoned his previous lap and is going to go for another effort. We've got Naga coming into the final sector in the number 30 Porsche. He has found almost half a second. That could see him jump up some valuable spots in front. What can he do then coming through turn 20? Using all that Porsche acceleration out of the final turn. It does promote him up to P24. The Nissan has found 7/10, 8/10 almost of an improvement on his lap. So Vahovsky trying to see if he can jump a bit further up. We've got a single split this evening, so a nicely packed server, but a little bit more variation in pace. But these guys undoubtedly will all have some fantastic battles amongst one another for us to witness. The 31 Nissan, though, coming into the final turn over the second up improvement. That's always joyous as a driver to see when you are striving for your PB. And for Vahovsky, then, it's a good enough for a 207.8. But unfortunately not enough to promote him up a position. What can Julian Gataga do in the number 32 car? He's found almost 1.5 seconds, so huge deltas for some of these drivers further down the order. The number 32 car trying to see if he can move up a spot or two. What is it going to be for the car? And he does, into 32nd place, just 0.04 of a second ahead of those around him. Meanwhile, Isaac Price, think, just started a lap. I'm trying to work out which car he is out of those BMW. So he is the lead car of those two. So I have to see how his splits fare. Pretty even at the moment. Delfanta, though, on a good lap. 2/10 up, almost 4/10 up at one point. Compromises exit, though, through that series of corners. So he has lost a little bit as a net result of that, but he is finding time in this closing sequence. We'll get one more lap in if he has got enough fuel in the car and looks to go for it. Nice line there through turn 19. Goes a little bit squirrely on the exit, though, into turn 20, though, trying to see if he can make his way up in towards P2. Still identical lap time for Ida and Price. Can the Audi split that front row? And it does! Delfanta then, by 0.005 of a second, goes up into provisional P2. Though that said, Noah Ida has found a 10th. Whereabouts is he on the circuit? He is coming through the end of Sector 2 at the moment. Marco Bischoff continuing to go quickly. Let's see what he can do. George Boothby still sitting in PA. Oh, that's a clip of the curb on the exit. You've got to be so careful there. Did lose a little bit of time on the exit, but I think he will maybe still improve. Price has come into the pits end, and so no further improvement for him or Walsingham, as well as some of our other drivers. George Boothby running towards the line then. He did improve on the last lap, but it wasn't good enough for an improvement in position. Noah Reeder, though, trying to snatch that front row, and he does! 204.490 then for the other K Kramer Racing Esports Porsche, and it's a lockout for him and Marco Bischoff, I think, because Vermont in the number 18 Aston Martin found a couple of attempts. Jardier all the way down, missed that. 0.4 of a second up for him, flashing the lights furiously for the Audi ahead, who gets well out of the way of the man P2 in the standings. But Jardier well away from the sort of pace that he would have hoping to have had going into this finale, with his championship rival starting on pole position, and by a big margin as well. We'll have to see what can Jardier do through the final portion of the lap. He's lost a little bit of time. It may be good enough for the top 10, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near good enough for the front row. Good final corner. The number 2 car heads towards the line, then good enough for P8 then. Slots behind his Yassi teammate, but still 0.4 away from the pace of the lead BMW. As we've also got Valentine Barrier, who is finishing his lap in the Ferrari. Huge delta improvement for him, but we've got no previous lap time, so it's a little bit of a lottery as to where he's going to end up. So the Ferrari number 6 car, where will he go? P16 for the Ferrari. Maybe a one-time effort there for that car, and that will be the end of qualifying for those drivers then. So brilliant stuff from Marco Bischoff to take another pole position here in the LFM Pro Series, and by what a margin as well. Fantastic stuff from him in order to get that result. Hopefully we'll be able to get the standings in just a moment, and we have. So Marco Bischoff then starting on pole position, a brilliant lap time ahead of his teammate Noah Reeder, makes it a K Kramer Racing Esports lockout. Del Fanta starting in a valuable P3, Isaac Price P4, Samir Fock P5, the leading of the Yassi drivers this evening. Walsingham starting in P6, and then George Boothby starting P7. And I think at the very end, Vermont in the Aston Martin did manage to get himself just ahead potentially of Jardier, maybe starting in P9, but disappointment for the man P2 in the standings to be at the tail end of the top 10. And then rounding out our top 10 was Marco Schada, the number 5 car. Good debut effort there from him, and have to see what he is able to do this evening in the Honda, the lead of the Hondas, with another one just behind him of Sebastian Gallet. And will they be able to make their way through the field then? But we'll have a look at our grid properly on the formation lap in just a moment. We shall walk our way through this grid of brilliant drivers and see just what they have in store for us this evening. Clearly exceptional stuff from our poleman Marco Bischoff to make it another pole position. And he'll be looking to see if he can get his 3rd win of the season. With the sort of form that he has had, he maybe would have been expecting to have a few more under his belt, but driving very, very well around this COTA circuit and managing to get another pole position and put himself in prime position to see out this championship. Noah Eder, good result from him in qualifying to start on the front row, with Del Fanta starting in P3 as he tries to challenge for P3 in the championship. So be interested to see how he gets on. Isaac Price, good effort there from the British driver to get the BMW all the way up to P4, clearly struggling with a bit of pace in that car this evening. Samir Fock, the leading of the Yassi drivers, good effort there from him to get into the top 5. And then Aidan Walsingham in that lovely looking Visceral Esports McLaren starting in P6. George Boothby, 3-time winner this season, will start P7, with Alexandra Vermont in the number 18 Aston Martin, the first of our Astons, to start P8, with Jardier then, man P2 in the standings. And a lot of cars between him and Marco Bischoff as his championship hopes start to fade away, potentially before the race has even begun. Marco Schade in the number 5 Honda will close out a top 10, with Sebastian Gillet, the next Honda on the grid, to join him in P11. Nico Peninen will start in P12, as then it will be Gareth Fullen, as my graphic goes all sorts of wonky, in the Aston Martin, starts in P13, and then Luke Addison in another one of the BMW starting in P14. The GTWR esports driver Konstantin Soldatov will start just behind in P15, with the Frenchman of Valentin Barrier in the Ferrari. See what he can do. He's put on stellar performances at American circuits previously. Whether or not Kota will allow him to do the same through the field, once more we'll have to wait and see. Sasha Vassner starting in P17, with Martin Hoyer starting in the number 22 Audi for P18 then. And then he will be joined by Jan Yoga in the P19 spot in that number 15 car. And then Diad Naga, to apologise if I have mispronounced that first name, number 30 car, starting up in 20th position, so good stuff there from him. Then Gunzenhauser will start 21st, with this man Giardinetto in the McLaren, the Italian, in the number 27 car, starting in 22nd. Jonas Bowman starting in 23rd position in the number 16 McLaren. Then Jonathan Clifford in the number 20 Lamborghini will start in 24th position. And then a nice elaborate colour scheme on this Audi number 24 car of David Fuchs will be in the 25th spot, with this man Chris Smith just behind in 26th position in another one of the Audis. And then one of our brave drivers taking a bit of an unorthodox pick, Andre Bayer, starting in 27th position in the Lexus. And then Rafael Alves for RT93 Esports will start in 28th. Then Jens Nilsson, the Swede, down in 29th position in another one of the Lamborghinis, with this man, Chris Vatenberg, in the number 35 car, starting in 30th position. And then we have Alfio Dirigibus. I probably horribly butchered that one. It will be in 31st. And then we have Jerome Eckhart in the 32nd spot. Kevin Hyman in the 33rd position in that number 26 McLaren. Then we have our other brave driver, Stefan Wachowski, in the 34 car, with Julian Gataga, the Frenchman, starting in 35th. And then rounding out our grid will be Martin Smith, the Canadian, in that last spot position then, as we then make our way across and see just what does Marco Bischoff have in that K Kramer Esports car. Can he make it a third win of the season? Clearly has had lightning pace all season long. He's not in the championship position that he is for no reason. He has been rapid and made everyone's lives very, very difficult to try to close in on where he sits at the moment in the standings. Jardier, the only man that can possibly contend with him, but where he is starting might make it a little bit on the tricky side to make that a reality, but never say never. We saw disaster strike for Marco at Monza, and not that I want to give any premonitions for him, but it's definitely not something that we can rule out for Kota today. But it will be himself and his teammate of Noah Ida to lead this group away in towards turn 1 for 90 minutes of action. Looks like the weather's staying pretty dry and we have a dead wind for the time being, so I don't imagine the weather will be changing anytime soon, whether we have anything at the tail end of this race, so we will have to see. But the season finale then of the LFM Pro Series will be getting underway very, very shortly. For 90 minutes of action here at Kota. Can Marco Bischoff convert another pole position into another race win, or will one of the other drivers behind him put a cat amongst the pigeons? Will we see a new winner take a debut win for the season? We'll have to find out as they make their way towards the green lights. And they are away then, and we get a terrible camera angle off the initial launch, but it looks like a good start there for Marco Bischoff as they all get very, very busy going in towards the first corner. Noah Ida trying to make it too wide through turn one and has kept his foot in the door. 3 wide in the background between some of the other drivers. Noah Ida couldn't get alongside Marco Bischoff entirely going into that next sequence of corner, so Marco Bischoff leads. Clean start from everybody further down. Walsingham getting close to the back of Isaac Price there, as Sammy Fock has maintained position as well, has got company. That's Penninan being put under pressure from Marco Schade just behind, but everyone looking like they've roughly remained in order of where they started. Marco Bischoff already making a breakaway on this opening lap and putting several car lengths between himself and Noah Ida, so a good start there from the championship leader, exactly what he would have been wanting. As it's all getting a little bit busier further down the order. Jardier. Oh, that's Marco Schade around. Tagged around out the hairpin then. As Jonathan Clifford, I think, almost got turned into him. Thankfully, managed to keep that out of each other's doors. Further up, though, we've got a lot of action going on between Gareth Hill and Galley. Luke Addison and Valentine Barry almost making it 4 wide down in towards the end of the back straight into turn 12. It's Luke Addison coming out on top in that battle with the Aston Martin. Galley trying to see if he can go around the outside now in towards 13. Where does Barrier fall into it? Solotov getting involved as well as he's got Bowman for company. Luke Addison coming out on top of all of that then, although this Honda trying to sneak up the inside in towards turn 16, just about managing to maintain position and stays just behind, as side-by-side in the background, Martin Hoyer and Sasha Vassen now going side-by-side through this quadruple apex right-hander. It's the McLaren also of Jan Yoga trying to sneak through as well. Vassner did make it through. Yoga, though, will have to remain behind for the time being, as they did go side by side, actually going into that final corner again. Hoyer on the outside, Yoga trying to get through in the final corner. Schade making his way through as well as he looks to try to recover some positions further up the order. We've got Galley and Gareth Fullen going side by side towards turn 1. The Honda trying to see if he can outpace the Aston Martin around the outside. Unable to do anything. Valentine Barrier, can he sneak through a position as well? Vassner and Bowman going side by side on the exit as well, just behind. I think Vassner coming out on top in all of that. Further up, pretty close between some of our other drivers, Jardier and George Boothby and Penninan, all very close to one another, but no one able to make up any overtakes as of yet, as Marco Bischoff pulls out a 1.2 second lead in the opening part of this race, so immediately gapping those behind. Walsingham holding on to P5 for the time being. Have to see how do they all fare down this back straight, as Soldatov and Barry going side by side in towards turn 11. The BMW being shown the exit curves and maybe are now about to come under a bit of pressure from Vassner behind, who is going to have the straight line speed as they head down towards turn 12. Audi coming thick and fast. Valentine going towards the inside, but maybe not enough. The BMW still trying to sneak down towards turn 12. It's almost 3 wide on the entry to the braking zone. Who's going to come out on top in all of this? The McLaren rubbing his hands, going to see if he can take anything from this. The Ferrari holds the advantage on the outside. Bowman trying to see if he can capitalise on anything that Vassner gets compromised on through all of this. But the Ferrari does maintain position. Soldatov then remains in P15. Vassner under pressure still from the McLaren of Bowman behind, but all saying line astern as a little bit further up. Galley and Gareth Fullen battling hard through that series of corners. Once again, the Honda much nicer line through the tail end of that, but I don't think able to find a way through just yet. But certainly a battle that seems to be raging on. Marco Bischoff then, unsurprisingly, fastest lap of the race, 2:05.2, half second clear of anybody else in the field. But some pretty decent pace from some of our other drivers in the top 5, as it's all getting very busy once more, with Jan Yoga now coming under pressure from the recovering Marco Schade. We know he's got better pace than where his position currently shows in towards turn 1. Nicely on the brakes there, and I think he may have that position over and done with. McLaren trying to keep a nose in there before they get through that very tight and twisty section into the S's, but the Honda does come out on top, and in the end the McLaren has to relinquish the position there. and may shortly even come under a bit of threat from cars behind. Further down the order, Naga and Gunzenhauser pretty close to one another. Can be so tricky to follow these cars at speed through that series of corners, because if you get yourself ever so slightly offline, it can be disaster. As you clip any of those sausage curbs or just simply losing the momentum further up, though. Walsingham putting some pressure onto the BMW in front. Surprisingly, though, Isaac Price in that BMW, good straight line speed down his back stretch, and McLaren really not able to do anything about it, as now Jardier tries to see if he can get through on his teammate, going in towards turn 12, almost leaving a hair's width between them. Slight tag on the exit, but they just about managed to keep it friendly, and George Boothby holds on to the position for the time being. Jardier, can he get the switch back down on the run towards 16 tricky sequence corners? Does he send it down the inside? No, George defends it. But can Jardier get anything on the exit? I don't think so. But meanwhile, in the background, Vassner and Soldatov going side by side. And I think in all of that, Vassner has come out on top. The BMW dropping further back then. You can see the Ferrari of Barrier run away in all of that battle, as he sets off in sights of Sebastian Gallet. Soldatov hasn't quite given up on trying to reclaim this position just yet, as neither has the likes of the recovering Honda of Marco Schade on the back of Martin Hoyer now. But it does look like Vassner has managed to maintain that position. Schade dropping a little bit further away than he would have wanted to in the latter stages of the lap. Meanwhile, further down the order, very tight tussle between the likes of Martin Smith, and we've got apparently some cars moving around the order. Not sure if that's a little bit of a timing error on my leaderboard, though very close on the entry towards turn 1, as Martin Smith in the Ferrari trying to see if he can do anything about Eckhart just in front, but it doesn't look like it. Meanwhile, I think there may have been a change of position, potentially saw moves for Alves around Chris Smith, I believe. Doesn't look like we'll catch out on the replay, sadly, but the number 25 car moving himself up into 25th position. Meanwhile, the Ferrari of George Boothby has managed to extend a bit of a gap away now from Jardier as they head down this long back stretch. Which car has the advantage in the slipstream is the Ferrari, but that Aston Martin is rapid down this back stretch of the circuit, so I don't think Boothby will be making up any positions anytime soon unless he's super late on the brakes, which he is not. Martin Hoyer, though, in the Audi, putting Bowman under pressure down towards turn 12, trying to go around the outside, deep on the brakes, and as is a McLaren as well, almost goes in Soldatov, and now Marco Schade trying to see if he can capitalise on that, go around the outside in towards 13. It's tricky though, a little bit contact between the Audi and the McLaren in front. The Honda trying to pick his way through, sprints towards the outside and has the line set up towards 15, got very close on the entry as they bump a little bit through there. The number 22 car of Hoyer, though, having to relinquish on the exit, and the Honda does gain another position. Don't think he'll be under pressure from the McLaren behind, although I say that Jan Yoga is trying to see if he can find a way through, but unable to do so just yet, and gets a little bit of a compromise line through that final sequence of corners. Do just want to check in though for this battle for P7. These two, Vermont and Boothby, have now run away from the BMW of Jardier. Not what he would have been hoping for, as Boothby gets a much tighter line through turn 1 there, but not able to do anything with it just yet. And I really do think he's going to have to be absolutely bolted to the back of that pink Aston Martin, be locked onto the gearbox down the back straight if he wants to make a move in towards turn 12. Trying to filter his way through these corners, go on board with the Ferrari. As a faceful of that pink Aston Martin. Oh, and a kick of oversteer on the apex of turn 9 that was. Or turn 8, excuse me. And that has dropped him well back at the Aston Martin, who, with that top speed, will certainly breathe a sigh of relief and have a bit of advantage. Jardier has allowed him to close in and see if he can do anything now about Boothby in front, as I think Marco Schade trying to make another move down the inside in towards 11 of Bowman, but Bowman fighting back on the exit as Martin Hoyer trying to see if he can get himself back into this fight, but this Honda has stormed his way past the McLaren very early on, so a huge amount of straight on speed. You can see gapping the McLaren as they head down the backstretch, despite the McLaren of Bowman being in the slipstream, and Schade does gain another position. Bowman under pressure from the Audi of Martin Hoyer behind. The Audi just not able to make its way through just yet, although Alves, I think, making a move on to the Porsche of Gunzenhauser. Gunzenhauser fighting back, though, with that acceleration in the Porsche, trying to see if he can sneak his way back through in this next sequence of corners. Gets a bit of a compromised line, though, as does Alves, and the Porsche of Gunzenhauser trying to find a way through on the entry to 16. Can't do it, as meanwhile, Bowman and Schade did swap positions. I do believe Schade seemingly making a mistake down in towards turn 16, and that allowed the McLaren to sneak back through to the Honda of Marco. Having a tricky time today, but immediately fighting back down towards turn 20. Number 5 car trying to reclaim that position, and he does make it through, and I think he will have that cleared. And with the straight line speed that he has got, he will allow himself to run away. But Bowman, his troubles are not over with just yet, because he has got the Audi of Martin Hoyer now trying to go down the inside in towards turn 1 as they climb up the hill. The McLaren of Yoga trying to sneak through as well if he can, as they're still side by side down in towards turn 2, sweeping set of corners. Who will come out on top? McLaren trying to see if he can squeeze out the Audi. He's still there, side by side action. Brilliant stuff from these two through this next sequence of corners, and they're still keeping each other honest. McLaren, though, does have to relinquish, and the Audi does make his way through in the air. Bowman's carrying a little bit too much speed and not able to keep the front end of that car where he wanted it. Although, having said that, Martin Hoyer makes exactly the same mistake, runs wide on the run towards turn 7, and that allows them to all close up. Bowman, though, made a mistake, and that's allowed Yoga to immediately start to have a bit of a sniff down towards turn 11. That's very, very late braking from Bowman, perhaps too late, and it is too late, and Yoga goes up the inside. They'll be side by side in a drag race, but the momentum swing for that lead car does allow Bowman to stay in front for the time being in the number 16, but immediately coming under pressure from Yoga as they head down towards turn 12. Jonathan Clifford trying to see if he can do anything in this battle as well. It's allowed Hoyer to extend his advantage up front. Yoga goes for a nice cutback towards turn 13, excuse me. Trying to go around the outside. That's a tricky one to make stick. He's keeping his foot in it, though, giving each other room. Brilliant stuff from these two. Can the McLaren of Yoga make it through? He can't. He backs out of it. Tries to show a no towards turn 16. Bowman very respectful, and in actual fact so respectful he takes the sausage curves on the exit, loses a position, and now comes under a bit of pressure from Jonathan Clifford in that Lamborghini, who's also got Giardinetto for company as well. But Bowman then did leave room. Unfortunately, that ended up being a little bit of his downfall. Meanwhile, we've also got this battle between Garafulin and Addison going on towards turn 1. The Aston Martin, good straight line speed as we've seen in that car. Can't get anything done on the run towards turn 1 as we go on board the front splitter of Garafulin. Firmly locked onto the gearbox of that number 9 car just up ahead, trying to see if he can do anything about it through the S's. Almost thought he might find a way through there, but unable to do so. I think there may have been a little bit swapping further down. There was Jan Yoga was defending that inside line from the McLaren of Bowman, who was then under a bit more pressure once more from the Lamborghini, but unable to find a way through. For someone who is very much trying to see if he can sneak his way further up the order is George Boothby as this trio battle once again. We've got a yellow flag for somebody. That was very, very brief. Almost down in the S's at the tail end of the field. Who is that for? That's for Andre Bayer in the Lexus. So what's happened? Oh, we won't get a capture of the moment, so I don't know if that's come from contact or not, but well sent around, evidently. And unfortunately, that's being a loss of positions for him. Someone I think who may have just gained one was Gunzenhauser, sending it down the inside towards Naga, in towards turn 11. Got to be tricky on the braking zone with Aston Martin of Alves just in front, but does manage to make his way through very, very nicely. As Schade and Soldatov once again side by side between turn 12 and 13. The Honda trying to see if he can make up another position on his recovery drive. The BMW holds firmly ahead for the time being. That like and subscribe number 8 car not allowing the Honda to make his way through in the way that he would like. Same goes for this ongoing battle for P7 with Romont and George Boothby, and Jardier just holding on to the tail end of this group. When these two guys start to battle, that allows the M4 to close up once more, but unable to do anything, generally speaking. But Jardier just trying to bide his time and see what he can do. Meanwhile, out front, Marco Bischoff has opened up over a 3-second gap, so clearly doing everything that he really, well, not necessarily needs to do, but certainly would have wanted to end the season on a high, as will everyone in this race, but certainly a big statement from the championship leader. Meanwhile, Sebastian Gillet on the back of Gareth Fullen, who's fallen away from Luke Addison over the last half a lap or so. And the Honda now not too far adrift, although the Aston Martin visibly more planted through his opening couple of corners, maybe sacrificing a little bit of momentum though through 4 and 5. Honda will be able to fight back a bit on the straights in the slipstream, but the Aston Martin will get a nice tow from the BMW ahead. And in actual fact, did close up very nicely indeed through that turn 9 and 10 sequence. Oh, it's a big lunge, and maybe does he get it stopped in time? And he does, parks it on the apex, but there's contact between all three of them, and Addison clips the back of him, and the Honda of Gillet involved in that as well. Pennanen took huge amounts of avoiding action to be not taken out there. Barrier just ends up finding that he gains 4 positions in one corner. It's not over and done with just yet though, as Luke Addison tries to find his way back ahead of the Aston Martin after that humongous lunge, and Luke Addison sends a big lunge of his own, but he's out on the sausage curbs, and the Aston Martin does reclaim the position. But my goodness, that I'm sure there may be questions asked about that. Meanwhile, Marco Schade and Soltov once again going side by side. The Honda now down the inside in towards turn 13, and he's got the drive out of the corner, and it's another position gained for the number 5 car, who continues his recovery drive through the order. But my goodness, there may be some questions asked about that. Meanwhile, Verhovsky and Dirigibus in the Nissan and Audi respectively battling further down the order for P28. We've got a little bit of a 4-way tussle brewing with these cars. But that was a very, very late send from the Aston Martin and Gareth Fullen, and I'm not sure anyone expected that. The driver I was most impressed by actually was Pennanen, as Jardier hunting around the gearbox of his Yassi teammate once more, who's dropped away from Vromont over the last couple of laps. But yeah, Pennanen showed great spatial awareness going into turn 11, completely drove past the apex in order to avoid contact from behind, and certainly I think saved him in that instance. Meanwhile, different lines for Addison, Vassner and Gareth Fullen through that opening sequence of corners. And that's allowed him to close up to the Aston. A lot of these drivers will be suffering some bits of damage, I imagine. Vassner probably the only one of this quadruplet. Quadruplet? Is that a word? Quintuplet. It's one of them. There's 4 of them. As Addison sends it down the inside of 11 and gives a bit of a shove. Oh, that's, I'm sure, I imagine the Gareth Fullen may not put up too much of a fight towards that, because it was just a little bit of elbows out towards turn 11 there, but the BMW does get ahead, but only for the time being, because Aston Martin is fighting back down towards turn 12. Vassner trying to see if he can get involved in this one as well. The BMW struggling towards turn 12 as Vassner down the inside of Gareth Fullen. Almost getting a bit of a taste of his own medicine here in towards turn 12. The Audi, though, may be sent towards the outside as Gillet tries to see if he can sneak back through and contact with Vassner on the entry. Manages to just about keep it pointing in the right direction, but now he's got a much faster arriving Schade in another one of the Hondas just behind. And Gillet's day goes from bad to worse, unfortunately, as it all got very bunched up. But elbows out driving there from Addison as Barrier going down the inside of Pennanen there, who had to open up the steering, not for the first time, but Barrier completely misjudging the entry there, and Pennanen managing to sneak back through. Poor Pennanen really being subjected to a lot of sends over these last couple of laps, but doing an astonishing job in that number 13 car to avoid contacts. But the Ferrari of Barrier then started in P16, trying to make his way in towards the top 10. As he closes up under brakes in towards turn 1, as does Gareth Fullen in the background on Addison, who I think has got Vassner now for company, as they might have a little bit of a drag race down towards the S's. Vassner, though, going very, very wide on the entry, and I'm not sure he's going to stay alongside, and he can't, so unable to do anything for the time being. Likewise, Schade and Soldatov not far adrift from Gillet in front. But what can Valentine Barrett do about Penninan? A little bit of a kick of oversteer through turn 9 though. And that's allowed Penninan to open up the gap. One that has closed back down a bit though is Walsingham versus Price. These two have been lapping very, very similarly over these last few laps. As Delfanja also very close to the back of Noah Eder as a 5-second gap. You can see Marco Bischoff hasn't stormed away from the field, but has certainly managed to open himself up a healthy advantage in the opening 20 minutes. As we'll get another 70 minutes of joyous action from here. Meanwhile, Vassner very close with Gareth Fullen and sends it down the inside towards turn 12. I'm not sure Gareth Fullen is going to be able to respond in this next sequence of corners because Vassner does have the advantage on that inside line if he keeps it all neat and tidy. Though in fairness, Boris trying to fight back on the inside in that number 10 Aston Martin as they're side by side towards 16 again. And he's being shown the exit curve, but the Aston Martin, fair play, keeping his nose in there, but unfortunately in the end loses momentum as he runs over those sausage curbs and unable to find a way through. Back in front of the Audi of Vassner, who does take that P13 position there, though I have a feeling that that may be a battle that very shortly resumes on the way down towards turn 1. Walsingham unable to do anything about Isaac Price still in front. George Boothby back and forth, concertina effect for these drivers. Jardier closes up, then drops back. George Boothby closes up towards the Aston in front. As another Aston trying to make a move. Vassner, we thought he might get a bit tight, but Vassner shuts the door on the Aston Martin as Marco Schade carries brilliant momentum through the exit of turn 1 now and trying to see if he can find his way through on the run towards 3, 4, 5 and 6, and he does! Fantastic move there from the number 5 car as Solotov tries to sneak his way through as well though, as that gap was always going to disappear, so the number 8 car has to stay behind for the time being. But fantastic opportunistic driving from the Honda, although Goulet has not given up on this position just yet. But with the sort of laps that Schade has been doing during this stint, you'd have to imagine he'd start to pull away, though he did get a kick of oversteer through that sequence of corners. As Goulet is going to send it up towards the inside, in towards turn 11. Marco does give him space on the entry, should be able to carry good momentum on the exit. And then he'll have the Honda all for company down this back straight. How much does the number 19 car behind start to gain? It's starting to close in now, but they're running out of pit straight. Does Schade defend? He's going to have to, because that Honda getting involved, as is Soldatov trying to have a run at this one as well. And it's Soldatov on the inside of Goulet, but I don't think he's able to get entirely alongside, and he can't, as in the meantime what's going on up ahead with Penninan and Valentine. Oh, there was contact between the pair of them going in towards turn 13. Penninan, as he flashes the lights in frustration, and he has had to try opening the steering left, right and centre during this race, and unfortunately does eventually get tagged. I'm sure there might be words between those two after the race. Valentine does seem to have been the faster of the pair, but certainly not the cleanest of moves that he would have wanted. Meanwhile, I think Nielsen and Smith going side by side as well. It was the Swede that ended up taking advantage of that Lamborghini straight line speed towards turn 12 and then converting it into the overtake, as meanwhile Hyman and Verhovsky in the GTR got pretty cozy going through that final sequence of corners. Awkward line for the GTR towards turn 19, but does manage to stay ahead for the time being. Oh, that was a very deep though on the brakes, and that does immediately allow the McLaren to head through. As you see the GTR just behind, we get a fantastic shot of the Audi now of Eckhart trying to see if he can find a way through as they have a drag race towards turn 1. The GTR completely backs out of it. Eckhart though going storming down the inside towards turn 1, and Hyman does have to respect it and he leaves him room, but I think it's carrying enough momentum on the exit of the corner to maintain the position. So Verhovsky losing 2 positions in 2 corners, mistake on the exit of turn 20. That unfortunately was his downfall, but fantastic opportunistic driving from the Audi just behind. Almost managed to capitalise on that, but wasn't able to quite follow through. Hyman though going a little bit wide through that sequence of corners will allow, I'm sure, Eckhart to close in once more. We'll have to see what he can do. Meanwhile, Gunzenhauser was all over the gearbox not too long ago of Alves just in front. But that Aston Martin straight line speed is very, very strong, although it's getting very cozy. Oh, and Soltov has gone very, very deep on the brakes. That's going to allow Martin Hoyer through his ear. Soltov tries to fight back on the run towards 13, and they just about manage to leave each other enough space through there, and Hoyer does get through, and Soltov relinquishes. What happened there then? So Soltov was up in front, and I think he's just going to have made a mistake unless there was a tag on the entry towards the braking zone. Hoyer showed his nose, and Soltov just completely misjudged his braking there and ended up paying the punishment of losing that position as a result. Meanwhile, Gunzenhauser further down the order, still trying to put some pressure onto... Oh, I've lost those drivers there. What has happened with... Oh dear! I do believe that we have lost a car into the Shadow Realm. That is Gian Neto, that I think is unfortunately disconnected. So, unfortunate stuff there for the Italian, as some of the drivers will benefit from that. Gunzenhauser and Alves being two of them. But these two continue in their fight, but not able to make a move is the Swiss in the number 23 car for the time being. Further up the order for the battle for P5, as what was going on there is we got some slow vehicle warnings through that opening sector. I think that may have been a little bit of a overly sensitive warning, but Samir Fock has closed up to this battle and made it a little bit more of a three-way fight potentially for P4 if Walsingham can reel in the BMW of Isaac Price a bit more. And also, must be said, Samir Fock in the Ferrari is doing a stellar job. He is a good 6 seconds ahead of the next Ferrari, his teammate George Boothby, three-time winner this season. And Samir, really very much the class of the Yasheet group that have joined us in tonight's race. So brilliant stuff there from the new acquiree of that team. A bit further down though, Luke Addison now has closed up to the back of Nico Pennanen, who has been involved in some busy action already, and the two BMWs may make it a tussle for P11 very, very shortly. George Busby further up has closed in once more onto Vromont, but just again can't seem to find a way through. That Aston Martin straight line speed is just enough to allow him to maintain the advantage. As, oh, what's happened there? As I think George Boothby now having to completely defend from his teammate. Jarnier now trying to go around the outside towards turn 1. Can the man P2 in the standings do anything there? Unable to do so for the time being. Will head on board the front splitter of the BMW. But I think he's dropped too far back. I'm not sure if it was a mistake from Boothby in the final corner. Meanwhile, Addison and Pennanen going side by side. Little bit of argy-bargy as Pennanen once again gets shown to the outside of the circuit. The Finnish driver desperately trying to keep his foot in, and he's doing so as the two will go side by side towards turn 3, 4 and 5. But in the end, the GTWR Esports car does manage to get ahead, and Pennanen drops another position and may even shortly have Vassner on his gearbox for company. And number 13 car may well find himself in P13 very, very shortly. Look at the steering angle actually on that car. Looked like he may be struggling a bit for front end grip. Really seemed to demand a lot of the front of the car. Didn't seem to naturally pull its way in towards the apex and drifting far of the where he would have wanted to have been on the circuit. Vassner very, very late under brakes there and closing up an astonishing amount though. Has compromised his exit ever so slightly. I'm not sure if he'll be able to do anything just yet. I do want to check in on this three-way tussle as Vromont makes a mistake, and Boothby trying to go around the outside now. Jarnier again getting involved into Ferrari, does get ahead. Vromont maybe losing 2 positions in 2 corners as Jarnier tries to follow through, but the Aston Martin fighting back. Wiggle for George Boothby down towards turn 16. The Ferrari down the inside, as is the BMW on the M4, and the Aston Martin gets shown the curves on the outside, and the Frenchman won't be too pleased about that as both of the Yasheet drivers make their way through into 7th and 8th position. And we've seen it happen a couple of times. Sometimes it is easily done. But we may immediately have a battle continuing on now as Jardier right on the back of the Ferrari. Does he think about moving towards turn 20? George Boothby shutting the door, but goes wide on the exit, and that may compromise his line down towards turn 1. The BMW has got good straight line speed, it seems, but maybe not enough that he would want. It does look like he may be able to clear the Ferrari, though. unless George Boothby tries to go Daniel Ricciardo-esque and switch back towards the inside of turn 1, but I don't think he can, as we get a face full of that Yasik car. But Jardier then does eventually make his way through, and the patience does pay off. But it's a long run down towards turn 12, so I'm not sure this battle is over and done with just yet. We'll take just a quick glance further down the order for Alves and Gunzenhauser, who have been battling quite hard for a while. There's a drag race now between the Aston Martin and the Porsche, heading down towards turn 1. Can the 25 car maintain the advantage? It's going to be late on the brakes. Both cars tend to be quite good under brakes. Gunzenhauser trying to give it a good go around the outside, and he certainly kept his foot in the door as that gap further up between Jardier and George Boothby has opened up a little bit. So we'll stay on board with this as Alves defends the inside line towards turn 3, 4 and 5, and that allows Naga in the background to maybe close in a little bit on this battle. But Gunzenhauser clearly and visibly quicker on the entry to those corners as Nielsen. Oh, what's happened to Verhofsky, losing a couple of positions there. I do believe all went completely wide on the exit of turn 1. I think Nielsen might have already been up the inside, and the Nissan just riding those curbs on the exit and losing huge amounts of momentum, as meanwhile George Boothby and Vromond go side by side again and almost contact through turn 13, but Vromond just about managing to pull it up in time so there wasn't contact. Meanwhile Martin Hoyer and Sebastian Gallay very close to one another on the entry, as further up we've got Vassner now trying to make a move on Pennanen, and down the inside in towards 13 the BMW does have to relinquish, although he's trying to fight back on the entry towards turn 16. No more Mr. Nice Guy from the finish driver of the number 13 car, and that little bump won't change any positions for them, but it did compromise the lines of Garafulin and Marco Schada. But I don't think those two will be battling just yet. Meanwhile, Gunzenhauser and Alves still going side by side towards turn 16, and the Porsche all the way around the outside. Be a brilliant move, he can make it stick, but goes a little bit wide, but that will be turning to the inside, heading in towards turn 17. Can he find the grip on that inside line? Alves goes very, very wide, might have the momentum though, going into the turn 19 complex. But in the end, the Porsche does come out on top. Brilliant stuff there from him. Meanwhile, Marco Schada now trying to think about a move towards Garafulin, towards turn 1, who's defending heavily in that Aston Martin. Does not want to lose any more positions. Honda sent towards the outside. Didn't lose too much drive, though, on the exit by the looks of it. Will stay in close proximity to this battle. Meanwhile, someone else who's staying in close proximity, George Boothby, after losing that position to Jardier, takes a face full of curb as I say that, and over that sausage curb will lose the position. Meanwhile, Naga and Alves going side by side now. Might be two Porsches getting past this Aston Martin in just a couple of laps, because the number 30 car trying to see if he can find a way through on the Aston Martin. Won't be able to do anything just yet. Meanwhile, Gataga, as what's happened there? Oh, Fatenberg has come into the pits. The pit window hasn't opened, so that doesn't look to be a scheduled pit stop to me, unless he's potentially unaware of the pit stop window, so hopefully not affecting his race too much. But that's certainly going to have a big impact in terms of where he finishes. I'm not sure whereabouts he was in terms of position, so net position-wise it may not change a great deal, but certainly for his hopes of moving up the order, that will compromise his day. Meanwhile, Isaac Price has been losing just a couple of tenths a lap over these last handful of laps, as Walsingham and Samir Fock have been closing in and making a bit of a three-way tussle for P4. We will be approaching the pit window stage of the race very shortly, in just a couple of minutes actually, but the weather hasn't changed from dry, and we still have a dead wind, so I do think it's going to be a dry race all the way to the end. But with the action we are having, that is certainly no bad thing. Meanwhile, Garafulin, he tags the back of Pennanen on the entry to the final corner, and Pennanen gets spun around again. Oh, the poor BMW. Meanwhile, Garafulin now immediately on the defence. Oh, he does actually pull to the side. He's going to let Pennanen go back through. Fantastic sportsmanship from the number 10 car. I'm sure Pennanen will still be very frustrated, but he will be at least grateful. Solsov now almost makes it 3 wide. Pennanen trying to sneak back through towards turn 1 and recover these positions. Gallay, Solsov and Pennanen all in a tussle now for what is P15. And the Honda coming out on top for the time being. Oh, Solotov darts towards the left-hand side, gets his nose on the inside towards turn 3, and that'll be brilliant moving and make it stick. Cuts to the inside of the track though, so he'll have to give that one back. And Penland now trying to come through as well as they head through his complex. A Honda coming out on top in all of that, surely. And Solotov now just trying to hold on to the position from the recovering BMW Penland, and does manage to keep the number 13 car just behind, as those two went side by side for such a long time. So tricky to go through there close together at the best of times, let alone when you are side by side with one another. So meanwhile, I do need to check in at the front, because Eric Del Fanta has been reeling in Noah Ida, as we do have the pit window now open, and this Audi starting to maybe look to be in a better position to make a move. We'll have to see how they all play out the strategy. As further down, George Boothby has closed up once more, brought Vermont with him. Jardier not the strongest pace in the BMW today, despite taking the win last time out. And these two going toe-to-toe for the victory the entire duration after they found themselves in those positions at the front. But clearly not working out for either of these Yassi guys today. Walsingham and Samir pretty close to the back of Isaac Price once more, but unable to make up any positions. Clearly very similar pace between these three. They have been absolutely nose to tail for so long, but never really able to find an opportunity on one another. Also, I must say, in the meantime, whilst I said earlier on that Marco Bischoff hadn't particularly made up a big gap, this is on board with the rear view of his car, and evidently there's no reader, a few pixels in the background, as Marco Bischoff has just been putting in fantastic laps, almost a second clear on the last lap to anybody. Really dealing with the tyre degradation well in the latter phase of this first stint, and that's allowing him to open up almost a 10-second advantage. So brilliant stuff there from the championship leader, the pole man, and trying to see if he can get his own triple wins of the LFM Pro Series this season. We've got a few drivers darting into the pits. Gareth Fullen and Goulet are two notable ones. They're very close on circuit, so I have to see how that all fares with those drivers. Oh, is it Walsingham maybe for the first time in a long time? Does he have a run on Isaac Price? Then BMW has extraordinary speed down the back straight, so he can't do anything about it. But what about Del Fanta around the outside of Noah Reader? These two trying to battle for second place. Noah Reader defends the inside, gets it stopped on the apex. The Audi now sent towards the outside, in towards turn 13. Del Fanta trying to see if he can sneak his way up another position. That's immediately going to allow this next batch of cars to close in. A little bit of contact through there, but just about keeping it all together. Del Fanta, though, unable to make a move just yet, as Walsingham right on the gearbox of Isaac Price. Price probably a little bit hesitant seeing that contact in towards turn 13 up ahead of him. And that has allowed just briefly this McLaren to close in, and Samir has dropped back a little bit, so maybe a four-way fight developing for P2 in this race very shortly. I have to see though what happens with the pit stops. George Boothby again locked onto the back of his teammate, runs wide though through that next series of corners, and Del Fanta does come into the pits then, so that's going to allow all of these guys to go through and gives Noah Reid a bit of breathing space. But the Audi clearly feeling like he has the pace to try to claim some positions using strategy instead, as Walsingham almost ran into the back of the gearbox there in towards turn 1 of the BMW just up ahead, but thankfully does manage to stop contact happening. Meanwhile, just looking at some other lap times in the field, Valentine has been cementing his P9 position. He hasn't really been reeling in anyone ahead of him, but he was lapping far quicker than any of the drivers behind him, so maybe a bit of a lonely race from here on out for Valentine unless any other shenanigans takes place. Let's see whereabouts Del Fanta emerges from the pits. Also do want to see with Goulet and Gareth Fullen. Big gap between those two, so I think Goulet maybe had less damage on the car than the Aston Martin, so that's allowed him to open up quite a big advantage to that car. As meanwhile, just further down, Del Fanta has just emerged out of the pits. That's a overly sensitive yellow flag. You see the gold Audi in the background. Nice clear air for him as well, so that's important for him trying to make this undercut work. As Vahoski, the next one of our pitters in the GTR, comes in. We'll stick with Hyman, though, for the time being. Although, actually, I say that Vassner may be in a position to try to overtake Addison just up ahead. The Audi, good straight line speed. Addison doesn't even put up a fight for that inside line towards turn 12. And I think the number 11 car has got it done well before the braking zone, and he has. So brilliant stuff there from him. Does get it stopped in time, and he finds himself now in towards the top 10 after fighting his way through the pack. So brilliant stuff there from him. Addison does seem to have lost a bit of pace in the latter portion of this race. Meanwhile, that was a wide moment, I think, for Samir going in towards turn 19. You can see closed up to the gap, to the back of McLaren. Oh, as he hits the brakes. That was a very odd moment. That was why the gap opened up. So Walsingham came into the pits, as did Noah Reader. But Samir, I think he had a change of mind. I think he was thinking of going into the pits and then couldn't quite work out what he wanted to do. So he hit the brakes, and that was why that gap suddenly emerged. But certainly would have lost him just a little bit of time, unfortunately. So not what he would have wanted as more drivers come into the pits then, including this battle of Yoga and Penninan. Penninan may have a bit of damage to repair on that car, because he has unfortunately been involved in quite a few incidents. I don't really feel like, I'm trying to think back, but I don't really feel like any of them have been his own, because he always was opening up the doors for other drivers and trying to leave room, and just seemed to get tagged in the end by a few drivers and drop him down the order. So very unfortunate stuff there for him. Meanwhile, the man out in front, the only man still driving in the 205s, Marco Bischoff, having the time of his life. Fastest lap, pole position, has led every lap so far. Will probably extend this stint as long as he can, so that then he can officially lead every lap of this race. But one thing I do actually want to check in with Noah Ida. Oh, Del Fanta, he has managed to make the undercut work. So Del Fanta then in the Audi now finds himself in effective P2 position. Has got a little bit of traffic to contend with just up ahead of Penninan. But that has allowed him to make up some positions, immediately trying to find his way through, and they will do so for the time being. And who have they got in front? That is Regibus, getting firmly out of the way of all of those drivers. That is technically 4th position, I believe, but they're not realistically in the same race. And Noah Reader now trying to follow his way through as well. But Del Fanta then making the undercut work beautifully well, and that sees him climb up into effective P2. So we'll have to see whether or not Noah Ida can respond. Meanwhile, just in front of these drivers, Penman going past Chris Smith. Del Fanta's going to look to try to follow him through as well, and maybe we'll have a drag race towards turn 12. A number 13 car of Penninan hasn't got the same level of straight line speed as this Audi of Del Fanta, and you can see may not be the rocket ship it used to be in a straight line, but certainly faring pretty well as Del Fanta now trying to make his way down the inside in towards turn 12, and he does. Noah Reader trying to filter through this as well, and trying to see if he can go up to the inside towards 13, and Chris Smith does not put up any fight whatsoever. So that allows each of these drivers through. And who is that? That is Walsingham trying to go around the outside now of Regibus. But this is all potentially playing into the hands of the likes of Isaac Price, Samir Fock, because they are still out in clean air, whilst these drivers are all trying to negotiate these bits of traffic where these are for effective position. As some of these haven't made their pit stops just yet, I imagine they will make a stop fairly shortly. I also do apologise, I have missed at the beginning of this race to add the mandatory pit stop marker for these drivers, so that doesn't quite allow us to follow along with the strategy as much as I would like, but I think we've got a pretty good idea of roughly where everyone is. Noah Reader down the inside towards turn 1 ahead of Penninan, and Penninan fighting it on the exit is going to make Noah's life a little bit difficult. That's not what he wants, but I think on the run towards turn 3, the BMW Penninan goes very, very wide and loses out of position, as does Chris Smith to the McLaren of Walsingham. George Boothby completes his pit stop and importantly comes out ahead of Romont. They were in those positions previously, but that has certainly allowed him to maintain his advantage on fresher tyres as well. As Vassner, I think we sort of waiting to see where some of those other cars that he was battling with emerges around the field, as Gallet overtaking a couple of cars from the pits as well. But you can see everyone has now suddenly, with all that densely packed action amongst these pit stops, has now spread out a bit. We've got another 10 minutes or so until that pit phase ends. Meanwhile, these will be very interesting times. Isaac Price and Jalier both coming into the pits then. And George Boothby obviously having completed their pit stop. And then the likes of Noah Ida and Del Fanta weren't too far ahead of these drivers. So it'll be interesting to see where they all filter through. Del Fanta's got a good couple of seconds ahead of Ida though, whilst Walsingham still trying to make his way through. Pennanen, who's really not making it as easy as some of these drivers would have potentially liked. He has got a right to defend these positions, but Walsingham will be getting very, very frustrated because this is working beautifully into the hands of Samir Fock, who is still out at the moment, driving normal laps. So let's have a look then. Oh, I think Pennanen, what happened there? Pennanen did dive towards the pits, so that allows him through. What about Del Fanta, though? Let's go on board the front splitter of his car. Do we see any of the drivers he was battling with emerging from the pits? That is Isaac Price there. And just behind with Noah Ida, Isaac Price has managed to close up the gap a little bit, but hasn't been able to make up any positions. But you can see visibly Walsingham, who was previously Hawkins between those, so that strategy has really not worked out very well for Walsingham whatsoever. And Isaac Price now should be able to extend his gap a bit, as meanwhile Vromont's making his way past Nilsson in the Lamborghini as he sets off in sight of George Boothby, trying to reel in that gap again. As Martin Hoyer comes out of the pits and allows Marco Schade through, as does a few other drivers, as well as Jonas Bowman and Jan Yoga going side by side through turn 1. It will be the number 15 of Yoga that manages to come out on top in all of that, with BMW Solstov not too far up the field either. And now our drivers at the front of the field. Marco Bischoff comes into the pit, as does Samir Fock. We'll have to see how that plays out for those podium positions. We've already seen Del Fanta manage to get the strategy to work in his favour and gain out of it. How will it work for our other drivers? Meanwhile, Yoga all over the back already of Soldatov. For our other drivers, meanwhile, Yoga all over the back already of Soldatov, and now maybe trying to throw a move up towards the inside of turn 11. Can't make it stick, and he's got Bowman for company on the entry, but it's a good run though for the McLaren on the exit of the corner, and he's immediately alongside the BMW as they set about having a drag race once more down towards turn 12. The McLaren of Bowman watching this, trying to see if he can capitalise on this. The BMW again fighting back on the straights, a characteristic we're not used to seeing. The McLarens generally seem to be struggling with straight line speed today, not what we saw at Monza. But Yoga now, oh, there's a concertina effect on the entry to corner. Addison bumping Bowman and going straight into the back of Yoga there. No, Addison immediately on the attack once more. You'd think it might be slightly more forgiving after him missing his braking point and tagging Yoga, who unfortunately was the innocent victim in all of that. And then Addison does gain that position, and Yoga drops 2 and falls back away from there now. Meanwhile, Del Fanta has got a face full of one car for company. What about Samir though? Where does he emerge in all of this? He is very far adrift of Walsingham, so the overcut really not working out very nicely in terms of track position, but hasn't cost him anything in terms of overall pace. And interestingly enough, Jalier and George Boothby now several seconds between those guys. So Jalier managing, like he did last time out of Monza, may not be for the race win, but managing to get strategy to play in his favour and capitalise on that and get himself a healthy gap between himself and his Yas Heat teammate. Meanwhile, Noah Ida going up back into P3, as David Fuchs will be the last of our drivers to come into the pits. As looks like for the time being, everything settles down for just a moment. I imagine that our closest bit of action on circuit will be with this number 24 car, as Isaac Price undoubtedly will close in just a moment. Let's go on board the rear diffuser of the 24 car. I think perhaps our only remaining driver to not do their pit stop. Let's see, where does the BMW gain the time in this lap? Seems more comfortable on all the entries to the braking zones. But you see the acceleration definitely in favour of the Audi, and the BMW starts to reel him back in towards the corners. As a Price getting held up a little bit though, and that's allowed Walsingham to close back in. So Walsingham, after losing out earlier on in the pit stop phase, as the Audi then does come in and all of the orders starts to realign. Just those few corners of Price being unable to get through on the Audi of the number 24 car. That's just allowed Walsingham to close up a little bit. So we could see that battle reoccur between these guys. They were nose to tail for so long, and their pace has been extremely similar all race long. But for the time being, it all settles down just a little bit. We'll have to see where David Fuchs falls down the order amongst his pit stops. Keep an eye, though, on how everyone has come about in all of this. Marco Bischoff lost a little bit of his lead, but still, realistically, when you have double digits in front of any other car on the grid, not really sure. He'll be very worried. Meanwhile, what's happened there? Marco Schana and Vassner now suddenly side by side on the run towards turn 3 and 4. The Honda slamming on the brakes towards the entry there and unable to do anything about Vassner in front, but good momentum maintained before going a little bit wide. Called that a bit too soon, perhaps, although it then comes back his way because Vassner then went a little bit deep and that compromised his line heading towards turn 9. Turn 8, excuse me. And again, favour, I think, towards the Honda, who maybe, if he's brave and the braking towards turn 11, does he think about a lunge towards the inside? Schade has been recovering positions throughout this first half of the race after the contact earlier on, sort of drop all the way down towards, I do believe, the tail end of the top 20, so he's done a remarkable job to try to put himself back in towards contention, but just outside the top 10, and now the Honda starts to try to fight back using all of that VTEC power that we all know and love, and see if he can make a move on the Audi, but the Audi still not the same straight line speed we saw in the past, but good enough to keep the Honda at bay on the run towards turn 12, though. Marco fighting back on the exit, trying to get a late apex towards 13, and around the outside, brilliant bit of bravery on the entry. Vassner respects it, and two side by side through his next couple of corners. The Honda's still maintaining that inside line towards 16. Can he get the job done now? Vassner sent towards the outside, and I think loses too much momentum on the exit, and Marco Schade there in the number 5 car. Brilliant job from him to get back up into P11 then, and recover another spot. And with 40 minutes left on the clock, he's got 13 seconds before we will find his next car up the road, but certainly not out of contention for a top 10 finish there, and a brilliant effort there from him to recover some of these positions. Meanwhile, battles that are starting to resume. Luke Addison closing up to the back of Jonas Bowman, who on the last lap, half a second between them, hasn't quite been able to stick with the pace of Soldatov out front. As Bowman, we know the BMW's been quick, we know the McLarens have been suffering, and Addison then launching it out the inside towards turn 1, trying to see if he can get that GTW or BMW into P15, and he does, but not without a little bit of shoving of elbows on the outside of the corner. It's not the first time that we've seen that BMW involved in a little bit of argy-bargy today, and whether or not there's any follow-ups after this race with some inquiries, or at least maybe some heated discussions, we'll have to wait and see. But at least provisionally, that does allow the number 9 car to get up towards P15. Meanwhile, Naga and David Fuchs are next two closest on track. I say that actually, I was telling lies. Alves firmly onto the back of the gearbox of the Lexus, just in front. And I do just want, again, it's almost a little bit of a tradition for me, do want to give a little bit of airtime just to the sound of this Lexus as we hear Andre Bayo roaring that big band, naturally aspirated V8 around this circuit, but not, generally speaking, the fastest car anywhere anymore, really. Used to be exceptional in the wet. It's got, I think, possibly the largest width tyres of any car in this series. I think primarily to make up for the complete lack of aerodynamic consideration to this car. It's shaped like a brick, and the aerodynamics aren't, in terms of downforce production, aren't that much better. But yeah, the track width, excuse me, the time width, making up a little bit for that and giving that car extremely good performance in the wet in the past, but with just BOP changes over time, unfortunately has just lost out, generally speaking, whilst other cars have benefited. But Andre able to maintain the advantage in front of the Aston Martin of of Alves representing RT93 Esports just behind. So Lexus with a little bit of a wiggle on the exit of turn 10. And turn 9 will hold that for the time being. Meanwhile, a bit further up the order, we've got Martin Hoyer, who has been reeling in Vassner over the last couple of laps. Vassner not faring well in all of that with that battle with Shada, as also somebody who is a bit on the move. Romont now all over the gearbox of George Boothby. And we know that Aston Martin is very quick in a straight line. Does he think about a potential move towards turn 12? He's too far back to do anything into turn 11. Let's go on board the dash of this number 18 Aston Martin. It's that blue Ferrari just in front at sea. What sort of speed are we hitting in this Aston Martin? Whatever it is, 250 kilometers an hour, already at the end of halfway point, and he is really giving that Ferrari enough to have a look up the inside. George Boothby just about trying to give him enough room on the entry. Fantastic racing between the pair of them there. Romont sent towards the outside, in towards turn 13. And the number 18 car having to stay behind for the time being. Can he carry the momentum down towards 16? George Boothby wisely defending in the middle of the track. Try not to compromise his exit too much by defending. This is going to allow Jarnier to run away a bit and open up his lead in front of these guys once more. But Romont then will have to stay behind for the time being. Meanwhile, Noah Ida, after losing the position under strategy to Eric Delfanta, now starting to make a bit of a surge back towards the Audi. See if he can reclaim that P2 position and make it a K Kramer Racing Esports 1-2. Let's see how do they fare through here. The Porsche good under brakes, but both cars very strong in acceleration. The Audi was previously the only car really comparable to the Porsche in initial acceleration. Its starts were absolutely ridiculous in that car. But after the BOP changes, not as strong as they were in the Porsche, has, if anything, got a bit stronger as Noah Ida takes a much nicer line through turn 8 there. As Delfanta got all sorts of upset over that curve, went a little bit wide. You see Isaac Price and Walsingham not too far adrift of this battle, so if these two start to tussle strongly, it might allow them to close up. Delfanta kind of half defending that inside line. You see Noah Ida really having to try to back up there and not get himself into the back of the gearbox of the number 4 car. How they fare down this back straight. That Audi straight line speed is extremely strong, and that is a big concern for Noah Ida, because Isaac Price in the BMW, we know that the BMWs have got good straight line speed as well, so if he cannot find a way through on this number 4 car, and if the BMW of Price behind can stick with these two, then we could very well have a three-way fight very shortly for P2. Meanwhile, Romont still locked firmly onto the gearbox of George Boothby down in towards turn 11. See, thinking about move towards, excuse me, that was 12, now into 13. Can't do anything into there, so George Boothby holds on for the time being. As what's going on further down the order, Pennanen and David Fuchs going side by side. I think that's in the opening complex of corners. The Audi going wide and then backing out of the throttle and allowing the BMW to reclaim a position. We've also got a bit of battle hotting up between Chris Smith and Hyman just in front. I do need to check in though again with the Porsche versus Audi battle at the front of the field. Noah Ida trying to find a way through. Delfanta covering that inside line early on. You see visibly there's the BMW of Isaac Price, and Walsingham not too far adrift from all of this either. So Noah Ida's nightmare is possibly coming true, because he's lost a lot of time on the exit of turn 1 there, and that's a bit of a wonky line. I think he's managed to keep it together. I thought he got himself too upset over the curbs there, and it was all going to fall apart for the number 12. If anything, you see visibly more agile than the Audi in front, but then he takes a face full of sausage curb. That drops him a little bit further back. I don't think with that Audi straight line speed he'll be in a position to do anything unless he launches an attack down towards turn 11. I feel like it's almost what he has to do to try to compromise the line of Delfanta, but he can't do anything for the time being, and Delfanta again sets it up for a good exit. And that surely, based on what we've seen on the previous laps, is not going to allow the number 12 car to make his way through. And if anything, now coming under pressure from Isaac Price, who was reeling him in very quickly in the BMW. Sense opportunity, Noarida now having to defend the inside line. He goes from being the attacker to being the defender. Isaac Price, can he do anything about it? He's going to be sent to the outside curve, and that's allowing Walsingham to carry great momentum through there. Isaac Price now has to immediately go on the defence of the McLaren, trying to find a way through on the outside in towards turn 13. Can't do anything about it just yet, and they will all maintain position, but you can see immediately how much it all closes up, and this is a nightmare for Noarida. He's clearly got stronger pace at the moment in that car, but the straight line speed just not allowing him to do anything with it. And that is unfortunately sometimes the life of a Porsche driver, even with the latest changes that have allowed them to, generally speaking, be more competitive in a straight line. Just not the level of top speed that he would have been wanting in that car. As now Walsingham faces a similar sort of trickiness, because he will be suffering with that lack of straight line speed that we've already seen in this car as well. And you can see the BMW pulling away towards turn 1 then. So no one able to make a move just yet. Meanwhile, it's allowed Marco Bischoff. He set the fastest lap of the race on the last lap at 2:04.9, almost half a second clear of anybody else again. And a 15-second lead to go with it. So he is absolutely performing at the top level and trying to see if he can get another dominant victory to seal off what has been a fantastic championship from the German. Noarida, though, trying to see if he can make it a German 1-2. And more importantly, a 1-2 for K. Kramer Racing Esports. As he sneaks up the inside, shows his nose towards turn 11, but if anything, that's cost him time. I don't think Isaac Price is in quite the position he was previously to make a move, as Gareth Fulling comes into the pit further down the order. So I can only imagine that that is for a drive-through penalty. We'll have to see. It does look like he's not pulling into his pit box anytime soon, so I think, unfortunately, maybe the first of our drivers to suffer from the track limits of COTA, as the Aston Martin of Romont tries to pull a Daniel Ricciardo-esque move and sends the Aston towards the inside of Ferrari. George Boothby manages to react to it and hold the position as it gets very, very close on the entry once again towards turn 13, but the Aston Martin, unfortunately, has to stay behind for the time being. These two, if they work together, they seriously could close in on Jardier in front. Last time around, they were 3/4 of a second faster, but this battling keeps on allowing the man P2 in the standing to maintain that 7th place spot as these two continue to fight hard. Meanwhile, Sebastian Gillet and Jan Yoga going side by side once more down in towards turn 12. The Honda trying to go around the outside now towards the McLaren that switches to the outside again towards turn 13. That got very, very close on the exit there. And the McLaren just about holding in position, although very squirrely on the exit. The Honda got much better drive now, trying to go all the way around the outside. Bit of rallycross style oversteer on the entry towards turn 16 there, and unfortunately didn't benefit him. It was beautiful to watch, but not necessarily the fastest way through there. And someone else struggling to make progress is Noarida at the moment, still unable to find a way through on Del Fanta, who has got a little bit of additional support in the chat. It's always nice to see drivers or fans cheering on their drivers in the grid. They may not necessarily be able to hear it right now, but certainly if they watch the stream back, they will be enjoying that. Meanwhile, though, on that opening sector, Isaac Price was absolutely rapid and now finds himself once more in a potential position to overtake the BMW of, the Porsche of Noarida. He has got Walsingham for company, but that McLaren unable to do anything in a straight line. Meanwhile, Isaac Price now sends it towards the inside line. Noarida tries to squeeze him to that inside line, and Isaac Price, good on the brakes, parks it on the exit, and Noarida then goes from fighting for P2 to maybe having to lose out on P3. The BMW now still fighting side by side, a little bit of contact between the pair of them there, and Noarida now under pressure for Walsingham, who tries to capitalise on all of this and seeing if he can get the McLaren up into a better position. Drag race out of turn 16, then the Visceral Esports and K Kramer Racing Esports going side by side into that series of right-handers, but I don't think that outside line has much grip, so he will have to lose out there. Meanwhile, Luke Addison and Soldatov side by side down towards turn 12. Addison trying to see if he can make his way through up into P14. Very even on the brakes. The number 9 car squeezing Soldatov. Oh, as he takes a big amount of curb there. And I'm not sure he'll be fantastically pleased about that. Does lose a position in the process. Let's see what that was. I'm sure that was a wild race. He jumps up in the air in that BMW. I'm sure Soldatov pleased he doesn't have a motion rig on that, because even in a simulation, I'm sure that would have given a bit of a jolt through his spine. Fighting back, though, on the exit of 16 and seeing if he can do anything about the GTWR car just up ahead. But unable to do anything for the time being. It looks like an Addison maybe has enough of a pace advantage to extend away. Did, though, go a little bit deep in towards turn 19. Soldatov gets a good run out of final corner. He may be in a position to do something. It's going to be tricky. I'm not sure he's close enough. I don't think he will be, so Addison then does maintain that advantage. Meanwhile, a little bit further up, Martin Hoyer and Sasha Vassner very close to one another as well. Vromont was on the back of George Boothby, who I think may have made a similar mistake to what we just saw from Martin Hoyer. Gets a very compromised line on the entry to the S's. Go on board. His C just gets a bit of a kick of oversteer. The weight transfer in these cars, they do have downforce, and they are obviously very good and fast machines, but there's no reading. Very, very late on the brakes there, I think. Fearful of Walsingham getting through and almost runs into the back, and now it's allowed Walsingham to maybe have a look up the inside towards turn 13. Not quite. And the McLaren has to stay once more behind the Porsche of Norida, as the pair of them no, really goes very, very wide down in towards 16. That's allowed the McLaren of Walsingham to try to sweep around the outside. We see these two going side by side before, but there's just no grip on that part of the circuit. But now that may leave Walsingham in a prime position to make a move on this very next lap, because Norida has lost a substantial amount of the tow that he was previously getting. So we'll stay on board and having a look at how this all plays out. Samir isn't too far behind in all of this. He's got a lapped car in between himself and Walsingham and Noah Eder, who may be coming under pressure a lot sooner than I thought. McLaren trying to find a way up towards the inside of turn 1, but can't do anything for the time being. But that McLaren, the Visceral Esports car in the hands of the British driver, is looking pretty feisty. And Noah Eder, despite seemingly having good pace, it's just not quite enough pace to get out of the clutches of some of these other cars and make a move. And the net result of all of that is what was a P2 position at one point by a good few seconds now turned into struggling to hold on for P4. So, not what he would have been wanting. Meanwhile, Marco Bischoff continuing to lap 1.3 seconds faster than anybody else on the grid right now, and has a 20-second lead. And he's barely had any airtime, but that is just absolutely phenomenal and seriously needs to be acknowledged. The pace that he has shown all season, the consistency he has shown, and this performance today is just absolutely to boot and to go along with it. Walsingham again closing up to the back of Noah Eder, who does sense the need to go defensive. Late on the brakes is Noah. Is he too deep? He parks it on the apex, gets it stopped nicely. Walsingham better run through that line. You can see Sam invisibly closing in on this battle. Meanwhile, we've got Vromont and George Boothby going side by side in towards turn 12. And the Aston Martin forcing his way through. George Boothby trying to hold him as much towards the inside as he could. And now they've got Valentine Barrett for company as well, who apparently he's having a look and getting involved in this one. Boothby fights back. Vromont sent towards the outside, and now the two Frenchmen maybe in a tussle with their own contact between Boothby and the Aston Martin. Just about manages to keep it facing in the right direction. And as Archie Bargy on the exit, he says, "You're going to push me, I'll push you straight back." And the Aston Martin now sent to the outside, and that allows Barrier to try to get involved in this one through the quadruple apex right-hander, but is unable to find a way through. So they all stay in the positions that they were just a moment ago, and contact again. And now Valentine trying to go around the outside of his fellow Frenchman in towards turn 20. And George Boothby doing a huge amount of work there just to try to keep that car pointing in a straight line. Let alone as he's now weaving from side to side there. I think that's a little bit of break in the tone, a little bit of unhappiness perhaps with some of the contact that those two had. As Vromon again sends it up towards the inside. George Boothby, no choice but to open up the door to not make contact. Now they're almost 3 wide in towards turn 3 as Barrier tries to go around the outside. I'm not sure if that's going to work. Where does George Boothby go? Contact again. You can see he wiggled on the way towards the next corner, but just about manages to hold on to the car there. And the Aston Martin of Vromon, very aggressive driving. It must be said, George Boothby tagged several times and all of that, and the Ferrari very sensitive to aero damage as well, so I don't know how that may affect him. But, my goodness, that got very, very cosy between those drivers there. As meanwhile, further down the order, as, who was that? That was, I've immediately lost them, unfortunately. On the replay, we saw someone going wide at the end of the straight, and that allowed a swapping of position, but did unfortunately in the end miss all of that. Meanwhile, the Aston Martin resuming the charge, trying to snatch away P8 from the Ferrari of George Boothby, who stays towards the outside line this time, so not putting up the same level of defence. Vromon very late on the brakes, as is Valentine. Barrier trying to sneak up the inside as well, and George Boothby lets them both past. That is extraordinary. I don't know if has he got a drive-through penalty and is thrown in the towel as such. I have no idea, but very uncharacteristic driving from Boothby there. We'll have to see what happens on the next few corners if he does come into the pit lane. As a confirmation in the chat there, and he has suffered a drive-through penalty, so that's why he didn't fight Valentine. He's allowing his fellow Ferrari to set off in sights of the Aston Martin, see if he can make anything of it. So the 3-time winner then in the LFM Pro Series, he was having a tough day already, and it goes from bad to worse as he has to serve a drive-through penalty. I have to see where he filters out after serving that. Meanwhile, Hyman and Chris Smith battling very hard as, oh, what's going on with Alves and Gatanga down towards turn 1 then, and I think Alves maybe has made a way through. What happened there? Oh, you can see Gatanga went very, very deep on the entry and then just had absolutely nothing to fight back with, so easy move in the end for Alves to find a way through. As meanwhile, Hyman and Chris Smith continuing their battle. So we'll actually also just briefly check in on this tussle nearer the front, because we've got the likes of Walsingham that's close up to the back of Noah Eder once more. Isaac Price not too far adrift off the Audi of Del Fanta, and Samir Fock trying to see if he can get involved in this battle as well for a top 4 position. Looks like they'll all remain in their previous positions for the time being, though. What about Solstov and Addison? Unable to find a way through, but still hunting around the back of that GTWR esports car. These two having a little bit of a get-together towards turn 12 earlier, as they've had George Boothby filter in just behind them. So you'd have to imagine that Boothby will be on a bit of a charge after that and may end up fighting his way back through these cars and trying to see if he can minimise damage, because right now, thinking about the championship, Del Fanta currently in P2, although being put under a lot of pressure from Isaac Price, could well find himself in prime position to snatch away P3 in the standings from George Boothby, who took it away from the Italian not too long ago. So that drive-through penalty may have bigger ramifications. Meanwhile, Sebastian Gallet now trying to go around the outside of Jan Yoga. Jan Yoga defending the inside line, though, by the looks of it, and maintaining that position for the time being. The Honda, though, switching towards that inside line. Can he carry any momentum down towards turn 16? And the answer is no. The McLaren parks it on the apex and does hold onto that position for the time being. And oh, interesting stuff. So it was during all of the carnage with the with all the bumping between himself and Vromon that George Boothby ended up getting that drive-through penalty. So maybe a little bit put off by having to look so much at his rear-view mirrors, as somebody else who I think maybe having to do that is Vassner, with Martin Hoyer all over his gearbox, closing in on the final 15 minutes of this race. And Still battles raging on. That gap opens up just a little bit. One that's closing down though. Goulet and Yanyoga going side by side towards turn 1. The Honda trying to steam his way through and contact on the exit multiple times. And the McLaren then has a switchback of oversteer towards the right side. Jonathan Clifford trying to see if he can get involved in this as well as he watches these two fight just in front. Visibly closing up in the S's. Maybe not able to carry as much momentum through there as he would have liked. Hear him playing with the gears there, trying to use the engine braking to pull the car towards the apex in the way that he wants. But it does look like that they have all maintained position for the time being. Do want to check in on some of these other battles at the front. Isaac Price still hounding the back of Eric Del Fanta in the Audi, as is Walsingham versus Noah Reeder. Meanwhile, it's Goulet and Yanyoga side by side on the exit of turn 11. And we'll see what plays out with them, but I also do want to see what happens with Solstov and Addison further up as they head in towards turn 12. Addison looks like he's maintained that position potentially for the time being. What about Goulet? Does he manage to find a way through on the run towards turn 12? The Honda versus McLaren once again. Jonathan Clifford trying to see what he can do amongst all of this, and Honda does make his way through and gains a position in the process. Solstov, down the inside in towards turn 16. Now's a late lunge, and that has allowed George Boothby to close up onto this pair. So what happened there? That was a big lunge from Solstov. Addison left the door open. And there was argy-bargy between those two earlier over the sausage curbs, and Solstov returning the favour and Addison being showed the exit. Meanwhile, Yoga and Goulet still battling, so in that complex I think the 15 managed to recover that position, and the Honda of Goulet ending up going back behind once more. Was just checking in further up the field. Barrett has managed to close in on the Aston Martin of Romans, as has Hoyer on Vassner. So we've got a lot of battles heating up in these final 15 minutes. Have to see what happens. Closest one on circuit again is Goulet and Yoga towards turn 1. Can the Honda out-drag the McLaren towards turn 3? Don't know if he's going to be able to get any momentum. Trying to see if he can get a nose alongside, but unable to do so for the time being. Meanwhile, Walsingham and Noah Reeder side by side through turn 12 and 13. Contact on the entry towards turn 13, excuse me, yes. And then Samir Fogg trying to find a way through as well. Walsingham flashing the lights, not happy with how all of that played out. And the Visual Esports McLaren locked onto the gearbox once more of the Porsche just up ahead. Didn't quite see how that one initially started, but I think one we might catch is Martin Hoyer and Sasha Vassner once again having a battle towards turn 12, his most popular place on this circuit, to try to go side by side. Hoyer trying to see if he can do anything about Vassner in front. That turns into a cutback towards the... I think Noah Reeder. I think Noah Reeder must have got a drive-through penalty because he's in the pits. So all of that hard work has been undone, and the pressure from Walsingham behind has allowed him to go through as Hoyer trying to find a way through down the inside of the Audi of Vassner towards turn 16, who takes a very similar line to Solotov, who tries to sneak back up the inside through his next series of corners. That'd be brilliant if he can fight that one back. Vassner not giving up on the position. He does get back through. So brilliantly fought back there from the German driver to see his way back up. Although in the meantime, what has happened there with Valentine and Bromont? So was it a huge dive from the Ferrari? I feel like it must be. Oh dear, Valentine just completely locked up the brakes there on the entry, and that gap completely opens up once more. And that allows the Aston Martin to pull away for a brief moment. Checking in further up, a few of these drivers inheriting positions as a result of Noah Eder's penalty. So the dream finish for K Kramer Racing Esports of a 1-2 goes down the pan with that result. It was already looking a bit jeopardised after those changing of positions, but that certainly seals the deal there. Sammy, though, in the Ferrari, not able to gain too much in a straight line on the McLaren ahead of Walsingham, but maybe he'll do something a little bit later on if he is able to maintain good pace in the final stages of this race. Meanwhile, Jonathan Clifford closing up towards Yanyoga. Unable to do anything though. What about Alves and Andre Bayer? Not the first time these two have been battling. They're down at turn 12. I think it's Bromont and Valentine just behind them, so that could get interesting when the blue flags start waving with those two. Meanwhile, though, always we've got a yellow flag out for Jan Yoga, but we've also got a battle going on with Martin Hoyer and Sasha Vassner once more as they try to have a drag battle towards turn 12. And the 22 car sent towards the outside. Number 11 of Vassner able to defend. Does he hold it on the exit? Oh, it's Hoyer. Several changes of direction there. Couldn't quite make up his mind which way he wanted to go. In the end, they all took their kind of lines through the middle of a circuit. A mistake there from Vassner on the exit. And now Hoyer trying to see if he can find a way through. But he just hasn't quite been able to make something stick. Oh, as he sneaks on this almost Verstappen and Raikkonen style. Oh, and there's contact through the corner. Vassner just about manages to hold on to the car. But the Martin Hoyer took a very, very big cut on the inside line there. Let's go on board with Hoyer there because I want to see what that was like from his perspective. They were fighting through this series of corners. And then Hoyer took an extremely tight line. Surely he cut the track there amongst all of that. You see he gets good drive on the exit. And then what happens here? Goes extremely tight to the inside. Oh, and just a little bit of brakes from Vassner in the middle of the corner, but just about manages to keep it pointing in the right direction, thankfully. Meanwhile, checking in further up, or further down the field, excuse me, Chris Smith and Hyman, I think, were swapping positions not too long ago. What was going on there with those drivers? I think Hyman may have made a mistake down towards turn 11, so I'm not entirely sure what happens with all of them. But we'll check back in at the front because whilst Bischoff may have a 24-second lead, we potentially have a four-way tussle in the closing stages of this race for P2. Del Fanta continues to do a brilliant job of keeping his position. Walsingham, good line through turn 13. That puts Price under a little bit of pressure. But right now, in this train of cars, the two cars with the greatest straight line speeds are at the front, and that makes it very difficult for the likes of the number 14 and the number 7 behind to make a way through. Isaac Price, so running wide just before turn 19 there. Not able to do anything is the McLaren. Oh, who's got a drive-through penalty? Oh, would you? Oh, no! Oh, Walsingham! Oh, you poor thing! After such a stellar drive, gets the drive-through and gets a face full of barrier for his troubles at the same time. What an absolute disaster for him. Meanwhile, Vassner and Martin Hoyer did swap positions once more. So what happened with these two? It was a drag race down towards turn 12 again. As we see Vassner defending that inside line. And Martin Hoyer trying to go all the way around the outside. Did he stick it around the outside? That's a brilliant move in the white Audi there, the 22 car, going all the way around the outside at turn 12. And Vassner not able to respond after that. But can you believe it? Walsingham, disaster striking for him in the same way it did George Boothby. And after being right amongst that battle, it all falls apart. However, that does take one car out of this equation, but there's still three going to war for this fight for P2. Del Fanta has managed to hold the advantage for a long, long time. Samir, though, in his closing stages of the race, all over the gearbox of Isaac Price. Can he do anything? But look at the straight line speed of that BMW. It's just huge. He's not able to do anything about the Audi in front, but he's just got so much pace down this back stretch. And Samir just waiting and trying to see if he can find any sort of advantage. I think he's going to need Del Fanta and Isaac Price to go side by side to really allow Samir an opportunity, unless he makes something really special happen in the closing stages of this race. Unable to do so as of yet. We've got about 4 laps left of this race to go. And action continuing on all the way to the end. Meanwhile, someone else has had quite a busy race. Nico Peninen battling hard with Gunzenhauser just up in front in the Porsche. Clips a curb though on the run towards turn 8, so not what he would have wanted. What about Nielsen further down the order? He was getting quite close to the back of De Regibus in the Audi. Just in front, who goes very squirrely, and you see the brake lights coming on for that Lamborghini to try and avoid contact. Good spatial awareness from them, but Peninen and Gunzenhauser battling down towards turn 11. Peninen now trying to get the cutback on the Porsche. Oh, what's happened there? We've got a yellow flag out for Nielsen, who is in the gravel. Oh, there was contact on the way towards the S's. I saw these two going side by side, and it all got pretty disastrous for them. And then we'll catch back up with what's going on with the likes of Penninan and Gunzenhauser further up the field. Penninan did get through, but Gunzenhauser fighting back then on the entry towards turn 12. That's allowed the 24 car of the Audi just behind to try to get involved in all of this as well, who sends his opportunity on the Porsche but can't find a way through. And Nico Penninan does manage to get himself up in towards the top 20. Gunzenhauser falls down a position, maybe another one if he's not careful. The 24 car hunting around, trying to see if he can make a move, but is unable to do so. Meanwhile, checking in back at the front, Isaac Price gapping Samir Fock a little bit, but not able to close in to the back of Del Fanta. So the Italian still maintaining that P2 position, which, as I said earlier, could be very valuable in his fight in the championship, because his rival George Boothby right now trying to see if he can reclaim valuable points down in 14th position. Wants to see if he can get past Soldatov, as meanwhile David Fuchs and Gunzenhauser going side by side once again towards turn 1. The Audi takes a chunk of curb on the apex though. That's going to compromise his line out of there. And I'm not sure if he is going to be able to make anything happen on this run through the S's. Has to have a little bit of a brake check through there as well to make sure he doesn't run into the back of the Porsche. So unable to do anything for the time being. What about Del Fanta and Isaac Price? These two still very close to one another. The BMW not able to completely drop the Ferrari of Samir behind just yet, but does seem to have gained a bit of time. Samir, though, in those last couple of corners, did gain a nice bit of time on that lap. So Isaac Price now sends up towards the inside. Del Fanta, though, does spot his braking point fairly nicely. Maybe goes a little bit wider than he would have liked. And if anything, Isaac has compromised his line. And Samir now trying to see if he can find a way through, but there's just almost no track available through this series of corners, although Price maybe making a bit of a mistake on the entry there. That's going to drop him away from Del Fanta. I don't know if Samir, though, can find anything through there. So difficult to follow through that opening series of corners. And with a car that is clearly struggling with straight line speed as well. Unable to do anything for the time being. Does he think about a move, though, towards turn 11? Surely it's his best opportunity yet, and he does go for it. Samir, can he get stopped under brakes? He does, but the BMW, surely he's going to fight back on the exit. And he's right on the gearbox already of the Ferrari, swinging back to the left-hand side of the number 7 car. And that BMW, I imagine, is just going to walk past the Ferrari. You'll start to see, surely, Samir appearing in his view. There he is. And unless he switches back across to the inside, and he does! Samir diving it down towards the inside, turn 12. Oh, just about managing to get through there cleanly. Brilliant racing between these two. And that's allowed Del Fanta to breathe a sigh of relief for the first time in about 40 minutes. And try to see if he can maintain that P2 position to the end. Samir, though, he saw the opportunity. He went for it, but he just could not quite make his way through. And brilliant driving from those two to not make contact with one another. Really showing how it is done there. Excellent stuff. George Boothby trying to see if he can find a way through on Soldatov. It seemed very slow in the mid part of the corner there of turn 11. What straight line speed has this Ferrari got? And I think the answer is nowhere near enough, unfortunately. What about Martin Hoyer, though, who is trying to make an overtake onto Walsingham, who obviously had that drive-through penalty. Faster generally on pace, but not the best in a straight line. And the Audi now of the number 22 car trying to see if he can make his way up in towards the top 10. In these dying moments, all of the action kicking off. Kick of oversteer, though, for Martin Hoyer, and that will upset his charge at that position. Someone, though, that hasn't given up on trying to move up the order and trying to get a last-ditch podium of the season is Samir Fock. Penultimate lap, then. Del Fanta has managed to pull away amongst all of this battling, but you can see Samir now very close to the back of the BMW of Isaac Price. They gave us some fantastic side-by-side action not too long ago. Always what's going on further down the order. Walsingham has lost a position to Martin Hoyer, who I think may maintain it on the exit with the pace that he's got in that car. So what happened there? Down the inside into the final turn. Must have got a fantastic run through turn 19, and he does make his way up into the top 10. So brilliant stuff there from the 22 car. Marco Bischoff starting the final lap of the race, apparently. He's just coming around into the final sector, though. I do believe we will have one final lap after this. I think that's the engineer getting him maybe a little bit confused. So we will have another lap of racing to go. And Samir just drops a little bit away from Isaac Price. Unable to do anything for the time being. He'll have one more effort potentially to see if he can make something happen and get a podium in the Pro Series. I don't believe that he's had one earlier on this season. Can he do anything about that G2 Esports BMW in front? All of this has allowed Del Fanta to enjoy a bit of freedom up front. That's Marco Bischoff then starting the final lap of this race. He's got 26 seconds to anyone else in the field, and his fastest lap is about a second clear, actually about 0.6 of a second clear of anyone else in this race. So he is absolutely loving life out the front of this pack. Further down the order, 24 car of David Fuchs and Gunzenhauser battling a little bit as well. We've got a white flag out for Walsingham, who's continuing to drop down the order, really struggling. I don't know if he's got damage on this car or what, but in the latter stages of this race, that car that was at one point fighting for a podium, really struggling to maintain any position at all, because Hoyer has run away from him, and now he's got Vassner all for company in the final parts of the lap. So we'll keep an eye on where is Marco Bischoff. It's just coming down to the back straight now. Vassner, though, down the inside in towards turn 19. We just missed it. Carried huge amount of momentum through the right-hander, and then really nicely spotted that opportunistic move in towards turn 19 then. Further down the order, I think there was a little bit of jostling position, but I couldn't quite see who that was amongst. George Boothby still unable to make anything happen. Oh, Soldatov launches it down the inside of Walsingham. Walsingham just driving completely to the outside track, and both cars going through. So Walsingham, really not sure what has happened to him, has lost a huge amount of pace in the closing stages of this race. As Samir then unable to do anything down towards turn 12. That's possibly his best opportunity that he would have had left. It's not going to happen for him just yet. What's going on down here with Walsingham and the likes? Walsingham still going slowly. Marco Bischoff, though, coming around the final corner to be your Pro Series champion then of the season. He makes it 3 victories in the K. Kramer Racing Esports car with a dominant victory from start to finish. He leads every lap of this race. As meanwhile, Solsov and George Boothby went side by side towards turn 11. It didn't happen, though. What about Samir and Isaac Price still going at it, going into the final corners? Del Fanta looks like will hold on to P2 after sustaining such pressure for so long. But Samir then, the Yassi number 7 Ferrari, unable by the looks of it to find a way through, and Isaac Price does hold on for the podium, and Samir will have to settle for P4. Jardier, amongst all of those drive-throughs and battling, does manage to get himself up towards P5, and he'll finish P2 in the championship after a valiant effort in a car that doesn't seem to have had the performance or some of those around. Vromont does hold off Barrier to the end there to keep P6 position. And then it will be the likes of Noah Eder that will finish in P8. Disappointment for him. Marco Schada, good recovery from him after being spun around in the early stages. He finishes in P9. As I just want to check in further down the order, because David Fuchs trying to go around the outside in towards turn 12. Oh, contact between himself and Gunzenhauser. Just about manages to keep it pointing in the right direction, as I think Walsingham has lost another position. He has. So Walsingham losing another position to Bowman. Did he run out of fuel? I'm astonished at what's going on. That's the only thing I can think of, is if Walsingham's run out of fuel, was getting very, very sketchy with the fuel. He does finish the race, but disaster there for the McLaren after such a strong bit of driving earlier on. I'm just trying to find someone that hasn't actually finished the race that we can have a look at. But my goodness, after all of that then, what a fantastic 90-minute end of this race. And Marco Bischoff then does make it a 3rd win of the season and seals the championship in style. What a brilliant, brilliant bit of racing from him today. Hopefully we'll be able to get him in for an interview, and oh, of course, someone just reminding me of exactly what happened to Walsingham. He didn't repair the damage. The reason why I thought he may have repaired the damage was I saw him dart towards the left when he ran in towards the pit lane, and I thought that maybe he'd chosen to repair the damage and then take the drive-through. He didn't, and that was why he was so slow at the end. Thank you, observant audience in the chat there, for reminding me of that. Of course, yes, a disastrous end for the McLaren that really, after showing such a strong bit of pace and driving throughout most of that race, did not end in remotely the way that he would have wanted. So driving a very wounded car by the end of all of that, and in the end dropping very far down the order, so he'll be disappointed with those results. But Marco Bischoff then taking an absolutely dominant victory, and not for the first time, but ends the season on a brilliant high. Jardier will finish P2 in the championship. We'll go through the results very shortly as everything comes through. As ironically, my game just crashed as the server finished. So thankfully, the game decided to have a wonky moment right at the very end. But I do believe all is well. Hopefully, we'll get these results in for the race in just a moment. As just trying to see if they have come through. Hopefully also we'll get some interviews going on as well. And there we go, we do. We have the official results then, or the preliminary actually results, before penalties. Marco Bischoff takes a dominant victory to end the season, with Del Fanta taking a fantastic P2 finish. We'll have to see how that plays in with this fight with George Boothby in just a moment. Isaac Price holds on to P3 in the end, ahead of a hard-charging Samir Fock at the end of that race. Jardier takes a P5 position. I think a bit of a quiet race for him in the latter stages. Romont P6, Barrier P7, Ida dropping to P8 in the end. Marco Schada recovering to P9. Good stuff there from him in the Honda. And Martin Hoyer rounding out your top 10 from all of that. So fantastic recovery there from him. Now I do just want to do a little bit of a quick calculation on the standings as to where does Del Fanta and George Boothby play out amongst all of that, because Del Fanta gaining 310 points over George Boothby. I feel like that was in the realms of what he needed to try to gain the position back, and it does. So Del Fanta then will finish P3 in the championship. George Boothby will finish... Oh, actually, let's factor Samir into this as well, because his result, I think he might be a little bit too far adrift. Natural fan, but I'm almost certain of it. So yeah, I think your championship finishing order will be Bischoff to take the Pro Series win, Jardier P2, Del Fanta moves up to P3, George Boothby drops to P4 at the very end, despite his 3 victories this season, as we get a fitting end of the season with an invasion from the bots once more. Samir will maintain his P5 position. I think Valentine would have moved up a position ahead of Karppinen, as Addison, I think, also would have moved up a couple of positions as well in front of... he'll just move up the 1 position, actually, ahead of Darking to go up into P8 in the standings. So, unfortunately, I don't have a more conclusive set of championship results, but your main names of the season after all of the action we have had. Marco Bischoff, really almost was there ever a doubt. He was in such a firm and strong position in the midway point of the season. He continued that level of pace throughout and finished it very, very strongly. So fantastic stuff there from him to take the win. Jardier valiantly fought, will finish P2, and Del Fanta has managed to recover what was previously a well-consolidated P3 position, but after dropping it to George Boothby after his resurgence in the series, Del Fanta in the end will move up nicely into P3 in the standings. So fantastic stuff there from all of our drivers, and we'll see if we are going to get any interviews. No one has popped into the box just yet, but we'll hopefully see a little bit of activity. Fingers crossed before we end up finishing for today. After what has been an absolutely incredible bit of racing, after an incredible season long of action. Obviously, here on the YouTube channel, we started seeing the coverage at about the halfway point, but my goodness, with the amount of action we had condensed into those races, that certainly gave us enough to enjoy. And speaking of which, one thing that I do want to make a mention of, I did see that during the stream that we did actually peak at over 100 concurrent viewers. So thank you everybody so much for the support on the stream and on the channel. It's been fantastic. Obviously, we'll be back with more coverage on here in the future. And also just want to see where things moved around to in the end. My screen has all gone wonky, so we won't have a look at that. Otherwise, things may explode in the closing stages, and we don't want any of that. It does look like, unfortunately, that we're not going to have anyone coming in for an interview, very sadly, which is a shame. But huge congratulations then to Marco Bischoff for taking the championship win in the Pro Series. Charlie 8 taking a valiant P2, and Del Fanta managing to recover up to P3 at the end. If you have enjoyed all of this action, not just tonight, but across the championship, then do consider supporting the channel by subscribing, and there will be more streams coming up in the near future as we catch up with all the latest and greatest action that LFM has to offer. And if watching on your sofa isn't your forte and you want to be behind the wheel, then do head over to the website at lowfuelmotorsport.com and get yourself a license, get yourself signed up, work your way through the ranks, and before you know it, you could be competing on track with some of the very greatest on the platform and seeing your name battling against the sorts of drivers that we had on this evening. But it does look like that is going to be it then. And the next Pro Series races, not 100% sure when they will be starting again. I presume we may be on a short break, but do keep your eyes peeled for the action when it resumes, as well as potentially any other events that we may end up featuring here on the channel in the future. But that will be it then for this evening's stream and for the Pro Series of LFM Season 7. So thank you everybody so much again for the support tonight and over the last few weeks. We'll look forward to seeing all of you again very, very soon. But for this evening then, that will be goodbye.